We should be live. All right, we are live in FL Studio. So, I want to shout out everybody in the chat. Give me a second to figure all this out. Let's call this live stream FL Studio Masterclass. All right, so for those who are live with me and watching the replay, this video will be a 24-hour access, exclusive access, limited time to an FL Studio Masterclass. So I'm going to go over the basic stuff and what you need to know. And maybe you just need to brush up on FL Studio. So a lot of us who are more intermediate, we tend to overlook the stuff that we learned a long time ago. What's up, Rel? Real Kumori is here. What's up? Main Productions Entertainment Beats is here. Rascal Beats, what's up? Samurai Champions is here. And so, you know, a lot of us tend to overlook the basic stuff because we think we know it all. And that's why we're not reaching higher levels. So this video is going to be about an FL Studio Masterclass. I'm going to keep it guided for the most part. And then I'll do Q&A towards the end because I don't want this to derail into really complex stuff that nobody knows about. Chilling, man. Can't complain. I just got my put my retainers in, so my teeth are a little more straight than usual, but they didn't stay in, so I got to try it again tonight. For those who understand the Invisalign life, Philip 23, what's up? All right, so I'm just gonna start. So for those who are, this might be a little loud. For those who are new to FL Studio, basically comes down to these five buttons, not 3, 5. These 5 buttons at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other buttons, everything everywhere else is kind of irrelevant. Okay, so it comes down to 5 buttons. Let me turn my screen brightness up a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's go through these 5 buttons, and then we'll start to navigate and make a track from only stock sounds. All right. What's up, Clip Cut? I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but shout out to you. So this first button here, I forgot to change my background. That's pretty hilarious. So this first button here is what's called a playlist. And the easiest way to understand a playlist is where you start to map out your song. Okay, so it's the big canvas. That's what it is. All right, so that's the playlist. Inside the playlist, you can add things to your canvas, like different patterns, and you can arrange those patterns and move them around. You can do automation, and you can do basically anything that leads to the final song is in your playlist. You can do a lot of stuff in the playlist. All right, so again, whenever you get lost, go to View, go to Arrange Windows, and go to Realign. So if you ever tend to get lost, let me double click so that you can see it this way. So if you ever get lost and you're confused and your stuff starts moving around, just go to View, go to Arrange Windows, and then go to Realign. So the second button up top here is called the piano roll. Let me make sure I'm not on the Mac. Okay. This one is called the piano roll. So the piano roll's job is to compose ideas. Now it's most of the time it's going to be musical stuff like a keyboard, a piano, your pads, your leads, your chords, your melody. That's where you draw it in. Okay, is your piano roll. This is what reads music from left to right. So what you can do, going back to the first button, the playlist button, you can, remember it's your canvas. And so what you can do is use the piano roll to create different pieces of a puzzle. And you can use that canvas called a playlist to put all those pieces together to make a bigger picture. And so that's what the piano roll's job. Now this is what makes FL Studio one of the best DAWs on the planet, is because of the piano roll. There's stuff you can do in this piano roll that you can't do in other piano rolls. And it's a lot easier to navigate. So we'll go through all the stuff about each of these 5 steps, but remember, it always comes down to these 5 steps. So if you ever get lost in the beat making process, it's one of these 5 steps. Now the next button up here, what's up everybody? Pickleball's here. Hey game, random question. We'll do questions at the end. I don't want to derail this right now. So the third button is the channel rack. Okay, the channel rack's job is to load up different sounds. So this is where you can account for all your sounds that you're using in your project, whether it's an audio file like a sample from a record, or whether it's a drum sound, or whether it's a synth. Okay, you can look, or even automation. Anything that leads to a sound being made goes into what's called a channel rack. All your sounds will be accounted for in this channel rack. And the word rack really comes from the analog world, which is where you would have stuff stacked on top of each other to represent different things that created sound. So that's you know, where that terminology came from. All right, so the next button here is the mixer. So in the mixer, this is where you need to start building better habits while you're making beats. So again, you don't need to know everything about FL Studio. I'll try to go into a lot of detail here. Forgive my dry is super loud, but I'll try to go into detail here. But the main thing is just that we build better habits with the mixer. And once we get to the fourth step, I'll go deeper about the mixer. But here is where you edit sounds. I'll say edit to keep it basic. This is where you edit sounds, but ultimately this is where you account for each sound. All right. This is called the mixer. So this is where stuff combines and it mixes to create something greater. Now the last step here, hold on. The last step here is the browser. So if you click this button, you'll notice that the file browser to the left disappears. And the file browser is where you search for sounds. So let's do a quick recap of these 5 buttons. Okay. The first button is the big canvas called the playlist. This is where you arrange stuff to turn it into a full composition or a full song. This is where you start to add up all the puzzle pieces. The next button here is the piano roll. The piano roll is where you customize the different musicality of those puzzle pieces. Okay. The channel rack holds these things called patterns, which are basically puzzle pieces, but more importantly, the channel rack houses every single sound that you're using in your project. This fourth button is the mixer, and the mixer is where you account for the editing of each sound. Similar to how Photoshop, you have, you know, different layers. You want to make sure that if you're editing only one object, you're not editing everything. Okay, so you don't want to throw extra, I'm trying to think of it. You don't want to throw distortion on your entire track if you're just trying to distort your bass. And that's what we use the mixer for, is to separate things into different groups and pockets so that we don't affect everything all at once. And lastly, you have a browser. So the browser is where you find sounds. And I'll show you how to import sounds into here, how to import your drum kits, how to save sounds so that you can see it in the browser. I'll show you how to quickly search through your browser. And this is basically where it's your toolbox. Okay, this is where all your stuff is for the most part. All right, so as far as like single one-shot sounds. So I just want to quickly say hello to people, and then we'll hop into the first section, which is the playlist and everything about it. So you'll probably learn a lot of stuff you didn't know about the playlist, even if you're intermediate to advanced. So here's where I'm going to go deeper on these 5 steps. Let me just say my hellos real quick. Pickleball says, hey, game random question. Any resources for flowing when you're first starting making beats? Well, you have to know your DAW, which is what this video is all about. You can't flow if you don't know the next step. So there's no flow without knowing the next step. That's funny. Ableton. I might do an Ableton one. I'm not a master at Ableton, but I know the basic stuff. Swag. Why do producers call it cooking up if they are not in the kitchen? Studio is a kitchen. Little did you know, you never looked at the schematic. My whole house is a studio. It's a kitchen, studio, bedroom. It's all in one. Sweden's here. All right, so there we go. Okay, so let's get rocking. Let me make sure we have enough folks in here so I don't just waste my breath. Okay, we have a decent amount of folks. So invite your friends, because this is really like an FL Studio masterclass. I'm giving you information that I would teach my premium members and people who grab our FL Studio course. So but the difference is this is only for 24-hour access. After that, I'm taking the video down to private mode to where nobody can see it, even if you share the link. So this is just a holiday special for you, just to show you how deeply we go at busyworksbeats.com. Okay, so the playlist. Let me change my background. I feel like that background doesn't represent my mood today. I'm not in a Mario mood today. So let me switch my background to something cooler. Let me see. I forgot my pictures even. That's that. Let's see. What's a cool picture? I guess Hermes. Whatever. It's not the exact picture I was going for. Let's do. What other FL Studio Masterclass you get somebody humming a dope melody? Where is my Hermes picture? Let's do Dark Trap. All right. Can't find the exact picture I was looking for. So the playlist. This is your canvas. So I used to sample inside the channel rack, for those who understand what I'm talking about. To make sample beats, I used to put them in the channel rack and chop it and do all this extra stuff. But it's actually easier for me to just sample in the playlist, and I'll show you why. We're not there yet. So let's say you have no idea what beat making is or anything like this. Now, the very, very basic way you could do this, and I would not recommend making beats this way, but you can drag and drop sounds into the playlist if you wanted to. Now, that's a style of production that I'm not fond of, because to make changes, you have to like know what you're doing. Okay. But you could, in theory, you could just make a beat straight on the playlist. You don't even need a channel rack, technically. Okay, so let's do it that way and just show people how to do it from here. So let's say you're starting from scratch and you want to make like a decap type beat or something like this. Now, the advantage of writing on the playlist is that you are dealing with audio files for the most part, and you can chop and cut off sound, whereas you can't do that with MIDI. Okay, so let's go to the first pack you get in FL Studio. That's free. It's called Packs. It's under Packs. And we'll get into the browser later. So let's go to some more modern drums. Now, these are called drums by Mode Audio. And these are going to be your more modern drums. Other drums are kind of dated, in my opinion. So let's go to kicks. And let's find a decent kick. I'm just using my arrow, my up and down arrow, to pick a kick. Now, I will just give you a disclaimer. The stock sounds in FL Studio are not really built for hip hop, like modern hip hop. They're just not. You could sit there all day long and try to make your kick drum sound good. It's just not gonna really stick out like that. So just don't waste your time trying to make the stock sound good. Hold on, I'm live. Sorry, my bad. Hold on, let me shout him out real quick. Yo, man, I'm live on YouTube doing the FL Masterclass, but I wanted to shout.
All right. Well, tell all the users it's FL Gang till we die.
We got on the line. We got on the line my best friend Jacob, who's the creator of Octave, his new Octave plugin, which comes. Do you still have that deal?
Yeah, so we have like a different deal happening right now, but yeah, if anyone wants to check it out, it's just octaveplugin.com. If they want to put in the code BusyWorksBeats, they'll get 15% off.
Oh, look at the guy hooking y'all up with the. I promise we didn't plan that code. I promise. But that's dope, and I'll pull it up when we get to the channel rack section. But Jacob's ear is crazy. Definitely respect the sound design process, and his sound selection is just supreme. So I highly respect the process, and that's why I always talk about Octave. But did you want something in particular before we hop off?
No. I just wanted to see how you're doing and make sure your week and everything was going good. But I'll let you get back to it and teach people how to make some greatness.
There it is. Good man. All right, buddy.
Have a good one, guys. All right, bye.
Peace out, bro. Yeah, Jacob's he's super solid. I highly recommend supporting that plugin. We'll get to his plugin once I get to the channel rack, which is number 3. So I have to write a note. Let me write a note so I don't forget. Channel rack. Or no, I meant to say Octave channel rack. All right, so that's going to come in step 3. So once we get there, we'll do that. Okay, so picking sounds. If you go to your browser, you want to go to Packs, go to Drums by Mode Audio. Let's go to Kicks, and let's find a decent enough kick. And again, the sounds in FL are not built for modern hip hop. They're just not, So if you're looking for drum kits and stuff, you can either click the link below to get some free sounds at www.producercommunity.net. They're completely free. It's loops, it's drum kits. It's a bunch of stuff to give you the modern sound. That's half the battle, is getting the right drums for hip hop. The rest is kind of subtle technique, okay? So let's find a kick. We're doing like a decap type of track, so let's drag Attack Kick 46 into the playlist. All right. And this is going to be assorted. Remember, I said all your sounds are accounted for in the channel rack. Okay, so once you drag a sound into the playlist, it automatically goes to what's called a channel rack. Now, again, I wouldn't recommend making beats this way, but if you wanted to, you could. So now that I dragged the kick inside the playlist, you notice that it snapped to the grid. Okay. So what you could do is if you go to this little magnet in the top left of your playlist, you can snap to different things. Now, the thing I would highly recommend you stay on is bar mode, because I don't make beats by dragging sounds in, but you could. Okay. But if you wanted to make a beat by a bar, if let's say I drag another kick in, the problem is there's no in between. There's no like, it's just one bar to the next bar. So if I go to song mode now, I can hear what's on the playlist. But the thing is, it's a bar apart, so that's not the rhythm we're going for. And so only if you're really making beats or really need to microscopically move stuff around, you're going to go to snap to grid and move this to a lower measurement. So the quick measurements you're going to go for, again, bar, I just highly recommend you keep it on bar, snap to grid. If you had to go one step lower, you would go to beat mode. So notice there's more vertical lines in the playlist. Okay. And underneath the beat, you could do a half beat. So you notice there's more vertical lines. So it's just getting into microscopic measurement. I wouldn't really go below 1/2 beat unless you absolutely had to for something specifically. But I like to keep it on. Let's do beat mode. Okay. So what we're going to do is turn the metronome on so we can actually hear these counts. Let's go to song mode and let's hit the space bar. So notice the metronome is going to hit every time it runs into that vertical line called a beat. So in short, I'm trying to teach you half music production, half FL Studio, but every time the metronome plays, that's considered one beat. Okay. And when you're in what's called a 4/4 time signature, you have 4 beats per bar. So just think of the metronome as like the heartbeat, literally. So when you ever confuse the words beats and bar, a beat is when the metronome hits. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. And then it counts all the way out. So the reason I said 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4 is because 4 beats is 1 bar. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. And I said 2, 2, 3, 4 because I'm on bar 2 at that point. Okay, so it's an easy way to count music. The easiest way to remember this is that the metronome is a heartbeat. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's just going to make everything a lot easier. So let's start here. So you don't have to keep dragging in the same kick. What you can do is hit your shift button and left click and just duplicate the kick. So you hit shift, left click, and you drag it over. So that's going to create a duplicate of the kick. So now let's create a rhythm for our kick. Now you'll notice that the kick in the browser sounds a lot softer than the kick in the playlist. And that's the reason for that, because I never understood that, why it sounded softer in the browser. It's because in the browser, it plays the sound at, I think, 80% velocity. Whereas if you drag it into the playlist, it turns it up to 100%. Or at least it might be 80% here. So it can even go louder than this. So I'm actually wrong. So it might play a little bit lower than 80%. So just keep in mind that it could get louder if we want it to. And I'll show you a technique where we can get the beat to sound more like decap style tracks. Okay. And shout out to decap. So let's turn the metronome on. When you're making a beat for beginners, turn your metronome on. The reason why your beats aren't good is because you're making beats that don't sound modern. And it's because you don't know how to measure time. Okay. So that's why I'm keeping the metronome on. And then I'm going to hit space bar for the play button. So notice I don't want my kick to go there. I want it to go boom, 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 boom. But I can't drag the kick to the boom, boom. Okay, so that means I need to make my grid more microscopic. So let's go to the little magnet, which is the snap to grid. Let's lower this down to a half beat. So now I'm offered more options to move it in between. Okay, so I'm just going to drag it over one more notch to the left. And that's the exact spot I want the kick. All right. And I only know that because the metronome's on. So it's boom, 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 boom. Okay, so it's boom, boom, boom. Okay, I'm just hitting shift, left click. Okay, then it's, so now we need a snare. So let's go back to our browser. Again, this little folder icon. And let's find a snare. So let's go to the folder under packs, drums by Mode Audio. Let's go to snare. And again, I'm trying to make like a decap-esque track. So decap doesn't use always your typical trap snare. So I'm trying to find a sound. Yeah, let's use this. This is like a decap sound. That more EDM trap type of sound. Let's left click and let's drag this into the playlist. And it really doesn't matter where you line your sounds up. You don't have to get obsessed about where it says track 1, track 2. You don't have to obsess about any of that. Because FL is not really designed like other DAWs where it's dedicated to one sound or another. Like the snare, I could drag that into the kick track. So don't obsess about the names on the left. That's more for your own visual process. So again, let's change it back to a beat under a snap to grid so I don't get too used to those microscopic measurements, because the biggest thing I see with you guys in your rhythms is that you get confused where you are. So the more microscopic you make it, the harder it is to understand where you are. The bigger the snap to grid, the easier to understand where you are. It's a lot harder to count 16th notes than it is quarter notes. Okay, so let's hit shift and drag this out. Now notice the track is very heavy. In the browser, it gives us that soft sound, but in the song, the sounds are very loud. Also keep in mind, FL Studio resets after its last sound. So it doesn't know to play it to the third bar and then go backwards. So in this case, since we don't have what are called patterns in here, we have to hit Control and left click. Forget the dryer. I'm actually going to close this door so we don't... Oh, never mind. Stop. Okay. But if it gets too loud, I'll close the door. So hit Control and left click on this little black bar here to highlight a section. Okay. And when you hit Control, left click and highlight a section, it loops. Okay. So that's the loop function. You hit Control, left click and highlight. I think you can also right click. I don't like to right click because I'm on a Mac, so it's a little bit more difficult. So I hit Control, left click and drag. Okay. So now FL knows to listen from bar 1 all the way through bar 2. If I didn't have this looped, it would just reset right after that last sound. Okay, and I'll show you a couple tricks that you probably didn't know as advanced users using the playlist as opposed to the channel rack. You could do a lot more with audio, I mentioned, and I'll show you a couple tricks, but we're not there yet. So let's go into a habit that you might want for at least hip hop. Okay, which is, let's go to the mixer now. So I mentioned how the sounds are quieter in the browser and then they're louder in the actual song. Way louder. Okay, so let's go to what's called the mixer. Let's go to the master fader and let's open up a fruity, where is it at? Fruity soft clipper. Now this is just going to give you a certain sound that we utilize for hip hop. So it's okay that we clip sounds going into this. It's okay that sounds are loud going into this. It's a creative tool. So just turn your threshold up. You can also turn it to the left. It's your choice. I like turning it to the right, but just leave it there. Okay, so that we just use that as like a safeguard type of thing. So now, like without the soft clipper, I could potentially be clipping. Like when I talk, I'm going above 0, so we're clipping. Okay, now if I turn the soft clipper on, even if I talk, the song's not clipping. Okay, that's why we use it. It's a creative tool. It's not a technical tool. It's a creative tool. All right, so now that we have the core basics, which is doom doom ch, doom da doom ch, that rhythm is hip hop till infinity and beyond. Okay, now if you wanted it more bouncy, you can go back to your snap to grid, go to half beat. We're gonna add one more kick in here. I think our snap to grid didn't go low enough. Go to half beat, hit shift, and then left click, and just add another kick in here. But again, we're going for more of a decap type of sound. So in this case, this is more of a music production talk. We're just going to take out that kick right before the snare by right clicking a sound. So that's how you delete stuff. You right click. Okay, if we need to add kicks, we can. So now let's add. So you're starting to notice, okay, the core elements of a beat: kick, snare. Kick, low frequency thing, snare, impact thing. Now we need a high frequency thing called a hi-hat. Okay, so let's just pick hi-hat. Figure out which hi-hat sounds the best. Now again, we're going for a decap sound, so shout out to decap. But he uses more unconventional sounds. So let's left click and drag this hi-hat into the playlist. Now here's where it gets fun. When you use very short sounds like this, it gets a little tedious to manage them in the playlist. That's why I don't normally use the playlist to arrange or make patterns, I'll say. But now with the hi-hat, we want it to go a little bit faster. So let's go to the snap to grid, knock it down to 1/4 beat. Okay, then you can hit shift. Now I'm going to get to the secrets for the more advanced people in a little bit as to how decap, and I'm using decap as like a case study, how he gets such a unique sound. We'll get into that in a little bit. So I did that really quickly without even explaining what I just did. So I hit shift, left clicked, okay, duplicated the sound. I hit control, left click to highlight, hit shift, left click to drag it out. And the reason I'm hitting shift, I know you can hit control B, but control B, you're learning that from people telling you hit control B is paste. That's not paste. It's called latch paste. And latch paste is a lot different than copy and paste. And that's because latch paste will paste the sound at the end of the sound file. So if I hit control B right now, let's do this. Let's hit control B on this last sound. For whatever reason, it's not copying over. It should work. No, I don't know why it's not working here, which is odd. Okay, so that either my keyboard's broken or that thing's broken. But what it would do is it will paste. Let me make sure it's not because of the loop. Control B. Sometimes this is weird. Maybe it only works for patterns. Okay, that's probably what it is. But regardless, whatever. If you hit control B on a normal instance, what it will do is it will paste at the very end of this. So you see how that's not on the beat. It's a little bit over the beat. And so you'll have stuff sounding off beat because you're pasting, you're latch pasting as opposed to pasting. So the vertical line's right here, but your sound will end up a little to the right. Okay. And that's what happens to most people when they hit control B. So that's not copy and paste. It's a latch paste, which is different. So hit shift, because when you hit shift, it will copy all the timing attributes. Even if a sound was a little bit off the grid, it will keep that off the gridness and just move it over in whatever increment you choose. So just get in the habit of hitting shift, left click, and drag is my point. Unless you know for sure that you're trying to latch paste if something's perfectly timed. So these hi-hats are a little too fast. So I'm going to right click and delete them. So again, notice how the sound's kind of unorthodox. So let's say it sounds too loud. How do you turn it down? You're going to go to that third button called the channel rack. Now, most people would tell you to go to the mixer, but nothing's assigned to the mixer just yet. So we're going to go to the channel rack. And by default, everything goes to the master fader in FL Studio. It's just the way they programmed the DAW. Every other DAW assigns everything its own mixer track by default. FL just decided not to do that. I'm not sure the reasoning and logic behind that. Maybe to keep projects simpler, but that's their process. Okay, because I guess in EDM, you have some guys using like 200 tracks, and you could take up the whole mixer just loading up sounds without even using all the sounds. So without all the complicated nonsense, just go to the channel rack and turn down the hi-hat with the channel volume right here. I used to think that this was wrong to turn this up and down. It's okay to use the channel volume. It's actually better to use the channel volume than to use your mixer fader for many different reasons. Okay, so just use that channel volume. Okay, so let's highlight this whole section here. Hit control, left click, highlight, hit shift, left click, and drag that over. Now notice the hi-hats are like there's no kind of swing to them, and that's the disadvantage of programming your tracks in the playlist. You don't have as much control over swing and like little timing differences, whereas the channel rack, you could do that really quickly. So this is the disadvantage of producing in the playlist, but you can do it. It's possible. So I'll show you a couple things that will make your track sound better just off of these three sounds. One is hitting Alt on your keyboard and then hitting right or left to nudge the sounds to the right. So I want you to zoom in and see the sound. Now notice how it's lined up perfectly with that vertical line. If I hit Alt right, it starts to nudge it off of that vertical line. Okay, so Alt left and right is how you nudge stuff in FL Studio. So let's nudge that to the right. Hit Alt right. Now I want you to hear this in real time. So I'm going to nudge it in real time. So right now it's quantized to the grid. I understand you could do it without the grid, but you can't do nuanced stuff like in the channel rack. You can nudge individual sounds at different increments, and you can do it in a playlist. It's just going to take a bunch of time, but it's not ideal to do it that way. So that's why you have to nudge everything as a whole. Whereas the channel rack can allow you to nudge individual sounds, turn up the volume of individual sounds. You can do a lot more in the channel rack. Anyway, hit Alt right and just listen to the groove change when I start to delay these hi-hats. So notice there's like a sweet spot. And that's because the hi-hat is not directly on the grid, okay? So that's the trick for your hi-hats and percussion. Now you could do that for each individual sound as well. You could do it for your kicks, you could do it for your snare. It's probably best you start with hi-hats, in my opinion. I'm gonna do it for my kick as well. In that case, the kick doesn't sound better off the grid, but sometimes it will. Yeah, we're live, okay? What else would Decap use? He would use some percussion. So let's add like a percussive bounce in here before we get to the 808. So let's just add this in, this blip sound. And again, when you're making your beat, don't get too into those microscopic grid settings, because you can get lost with your timing very easily. It's so easy to get lost with measuring, especially when you're a beginner. So again, when you remember, change your snap to grid to at least 1/2 beat and higher to a bar. Because if you get caught up in like 16th beat and all this other stuff, like quarter beat and quarter step, you're going to get so easily lost as to where you are. It's going to make making beats harder. So we're going to keep it on a 1/2 beat. And I'm just going to add these little percussive blips in here. Okay, and I'll show you how to make this cooler over time. Now, this is very basic. We didn't really get into the nuances of it yet. So let's go to the channel rack, and let's say that percussive strike is a little too loud. Let's just turn down this channel volume. And again, we can now highlight it, hit a control, and hit Alt right or left to move that sound around, so it's not directly on the grid. And that's what makes Decap and other producers like Decap sound so unique, is because everything's not perfectly aligned. And we'll make these sounds sound cooler. I didn't really show you the sauce just yet. All right, so now another main difference between channel rack stuff and dragging audio clips into the playlist is you don't have what are called sampler envelopes. Yeah, you don't have the ability to give it like a shape. You can only affect certain parameters, and like you can do a lot. I'm looking at the list. You can do a lot, but not everything. So just keep that in mind too. Okay, now let's go to 808s. So for this one, I'm going to use a stock sound. Now again, FL is not built for trap genre. It's built for EDM. So your stock sounds are probably not going to have a decent sound here, but let's at least go to kicks under drums by Mode Audio. Let's go to long kick. Let's scroll down until we see like long kick. Here it is, power long kick. And these are their like 808s. Now they're not really trap 808s at all. Okay, so let's figure out which one kind of meshes. This one kind of reminds me of Decap. And the one difference about dragging stuff into the playlist is you can't change the note value of the 808. So this is going to make it a little more difficult. So the type of music you're going to create is going to be different. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Don't get too... I'll say, I can't tell you what to do to be creative, but don't get too comfortable making beats in a playlist, because you're limiting yourself. You can change the note of this 808, but doing it is going to be tedious, okay? So it's only going to stay one note. And notice how it's super loud, right? So let's go to channel rack, turn that down just a little bit. I'm going to get rid of every other hi-hat. I'm actually going to move these hi-hats to the and, so it's 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, so I put the 808 in a very weird spot. Actually, no, never mind. Let's just move the 808. Okay, so I'm going to hit shift and duplicate the 808. Now notice with the audio file, as I drag it, I feel like we need more energy, so I'm actually going to add those hi-hats back. I hit control, hit shift. Okay, so let's change up that kick pattern. So now we're getting into music production technologies and techniques, which is that these sounds don't really go together that well. So you would have to edit them to blend them together. But I'm trying to keep this really straightforward and simple. So before I edit all these sounds to make them sound more like hip hop and trap, let's just make the 808 hit and then stop. So the way you make it stop is you left click and drag this edge. Now, if you're left clicking and where is it at? The sample looks like it's doing something like this, then you're in what's called time stretch mode. That's not what you want to do. So let's Control Z that. So hit Shift M, and you'll notice on the top left here where it says audio clips, turn stretch mode off. So when you're left clicking and dragging, it's just masking and revealing things. If you have time stretch mode on, it does a different function. Okay. Little swing there. Okay, so I'm trying to think what we could do. Let's add a melody, and then I'll show you how to brush it up and make it sound more modern. So right now it's very, very, very basic. I would not put that beat out at all. Let's figure out how to make a melody in the playlist. So with Decap style, he's more like percussive, bouncy based. So let's start adding just percussive stuff in here. And again, go to your channel rack, turn that channel volume for that specific sound down. And I'll show you over time how to change the pitch of these things. Let's turn the 808 down just so we can preserve our ears for now. Okay. Actually, let me just change this rhythm so it's more like trap. Now keep in mind, this kick is not really a trap kick. That's why it sounds more EDM. That's why I said the FL Studio sounds are not built for hip hop, not built for trap. There's a couple sounds in here, but no, they're just not the sound. So you got to really find somebody whose sounds you like. And again, you can get free sounds at www.producercommunity.net if you're looking for free sounds, free loops. Okay. So now we're adding all this percussive stuff. This percussion is tonal percussion. So a hi-hat is just this percussion is like ding, ding, like it has a note to it. Okay. And now let's add more non-tonal percussion like a snap. Now I'm looking for stuff like dum, brr, dum. Okay, so I'm just listening for those type of sounds over time. So let's add this little thing in here. So I want to go dum, brr. So now the question is, how do you make a hi-hat roll type of thing? So let's drag that to the left, turn the channel volume down from the channel rack. So let's zoom in, and we need to change the snap to grid so that we can even chop it to that brr type of speed. Now here's where you get into the microscopic snap to grids, like a quarter step and all this type of stuff. So we're just gonna left click and mask that so it's, you know, as small as we can get it. Hit Shift. And this is why I said you don't want to get too microscopic because you might get lost as to like the speed of the sound. And then we just hit Shift, left click and drag it. So it goes brr. And again, I'll make this sound more professional. I'll even show you how to take this kind of basic sound and make it sound crazy better. But we're not there yet. So let's do something unique here, which is a little more advanced. We're going to take this last one here and go to Make Unique. Now what this does is it duplicates whatever the audio file is. So it could be a whole song or it could be just a little snippet of a sound. And what I'm going to do is go to stretch mode now, or hit Shift M to turn that on and off. Make sure it's on stretch mode because that's different than just masking. And left click and drag the sound out. So now it's going to drag that ding sound out. So now it's like boom. And this is how we make really unique percussive sections in our song. So for the more advanced people, you can use this technique as well. So we're not done with the sound though. Let's go to the top left. This is how you access the files thing, and go to channel settings. And then what we're going to do is hit reverse. So it's not going to reverse what you see. It's going to reverse the entire sound file. So you see how I reversed it and it just disappeared. I'm going to hit Control Z now. And again, when you hit reverse, it reverses everything about the sound. So if it's a whole song, it's going to reverse the entire song, even if you have a little clip showing. So what you need to do is go to make unique as sample. And that's the difference between make unique and make unique as sample. Because make unique as sample will just only look at whatever's visible and use only that, and it will make it its separate thing. So let's make unique as sample, hit yes. Save it to whatever file, and then go back to channel settings. Now what we're going to do is hit reverse. So notice that it actually reversed what we visually saw. And that's what separates FL Studio from like Ableton. When you hit reverse on Ableton, it reverses whatever it sees, whereas FL Studio, you have to specifically tell it to be different. So now we're going to reverse that. So now this sound will reverse into the next bar. So it goes whoop. And it's these little things that make really unique production sounds. So notice that this little blip at the end is a little bit over that bar count. Now I like how it goes, okay, but let's say you didn't want it to do that. You would hit Alt, which is your best friend of nudging things around. Hit Alt and left click until you get it to line up the way you want it. So now for me, the timing before sounded best. And that's how you start creating really unique grooves, just reversing sounds or stretching sounds out. So that's a more advanced technique as well. Now let's say you want the 808 to go a little bit lower. I know I'm going a little bit fast and a little more advanced pretty quick, but I want to show you how to do that. You would have to go to the channel settings of the sound using that top left icon, go to channel settings, and you would have to pitch the 808 manually because again, we're not in the sampler, the channel rack, excuse me, where we could use the piano roll to draw out notes. And so the playlist doesn't really allow you to draw notes. So you have to manually do it. And this is why I said it's not ideal for writing your 808 bass lines. But if you wanted to just pitch the 808 bass line, you would just drag this pitch knob down in increments of 100 cents. Every 100 cents is one note up or down. So if I wanted to pull it one note down, the top left tells me that value. So if you read the top left, it says 100 cents, negative 100 cents. And now that note of the 808 changed. I wanted to go boom. So let's drag it down to boom. Boom, boom. One note more. Okay. And now we're starting to make this beat sound more professional because it's not random samples that aren't tuned to anything. Okay, so now I want to tune this think. So let's go to channel settings, same exact concept. Pull the pitch down in 100 cent increments. So ding. Now let's say like this sound. Now luckily it's tuned there, but let's say some sounds are kind of in between notes. So in that case, you would either just left click and slowly go in between negative 100 and negative 200, or you can hit control and left click and drag that to do microscopic detuning. Okay, but I would just recommend you stay to 100 cents at a time. See how it's kind of out of tune? And if I pull it one more note down, it sounds out of key. So it's somewhere in between 100 and 200. And that's because of the type of sound that it is. So I'm going to hit control, left click, drag the pitch. I like that pitch. Okay, so we can go on and on and on about that. Yeah, we'll get into automation in a little bit. So now you start to see how we're modernizing this beat. So I still want to add little percussive stuff. So let's go through this folder. So again, whenever your grid gets like complex, change your snap to grid to a half beat. You don't want it to get too complex or else you're going to have a hard time lining stuff up. And that sounds too loud. Go to channel rack, turn it down. And let's do that same trick we did with the other percussion here. Hit shift to duplicate it. We need to make this unique as a sample. Okay, so actually we don't need to make it unique as a sample because it's a pretty short sample. So let's just make it unique. Go to the top left, go to channel settings, hit reverse. So now we can play around with the reverse sound. And again, you can see it's not lined up. So we have to hit Alt, left click, and move it over. And these little things make your beat sound so much better. Let's do something cool here with the hi-hats. Let's go to the top left, go to channel settings, and pitch the hi-hat down or up. Now right here, I want to go so let's go to snap to grid. Let's go to quarter beat, and let's hit shift to duplicate that hi-hat over. And let's say at the end, I want a little hi-hat roll. I know I'm kind of moving more advanced here, but this is where you would change your snap to grid, hit shift, and just create a little hi-hat roll. Now here, the sound's a little crazy. Now, one thing that can happen in the playlist is sounds can overlap. Like right now, I can drag the sound over top of another sound, and it's impossible to even know that until I right click to delete, and it won't delete. So you got to be really careful when you're in the playlist, because FL made it so that you can stack up stuff. I don't know why they made it that way, because you can accidentally just duplicate something and forgot you duplicated it, and it's just super loud. So if a sound's just randomly loud, try right clicking it to delete the pattern, because chances are it's just duplicated on itself. Random tip, because that happens a lot. Okay, so we turn that little basic stock sounds into something that sounds a little bit more modern. Now we need like a melody. We need like something melodic. So we could use percussion to do that. There's a gazillion things like this sound. But let's say you wanted to use a modern loop. So the only thing is I'm trying to use stock sounds. I don't think they have loops in their stock sounds. They do have loops, but they're not built for our type of loops, if you know what I'm saying. So let's just say you got a loop from, trying to think who's the loops. Let's use Jacob's loops since he called me. Shout out to Jacob. But Jacob has some loops. I don't know if they're still available, but it's called the Best Friend Sample Collection, Elevate Sample Collection. Basically, when you get Octave, he sends you a bunch of cool stuff with Octave. So I bought his loop package. This might be additional to Octave. I think I bought this separately. So let's add this in. So let's say you have some sample or some loop. Now the question is, okay, I have a sample or a loop. It's off beat. So this is going to sound off beat. Actually, this kind of sounds on beat, even though it's off beat technically. So what you need to do first when you're dealing with loops is, good loop makers, they tell you the BPM. So this one says 81 BPM, and it tells you the key E flat minor. Okay, so that's what the number stands for. When it says 81, it means 81 BPM. So currently we're at 140 BPM. And so you can either change your project file to 81, but what that's going to do is mess with your drum sample. So let's do that. Let's drag this all the way down to 81. Now notice the drums look different now. But it's still doable. Everything's in the right place. So except this last, you see how this sounds not at the end anymore? Okay, so that's what happens when you start moving the tempo without stuff being locked to the grid. Okay, so you don't need to know all the terminology here. The point is, drop it down to 81 BPM and measure how long it is. So this one's 10 bars. That's a random loop length, but just go to snap to grid bar. Now most loop makers, they make their loops either 8 bars or 16 bars. Now this one's 10 bars because he's creative. So let's drop this down to 8 bars. And all I did was change my snap to grid to bar mode, okay, and just drag it to 8. Now once it's on 8, I need to collapse it. Okay, so we're at 140. That means we need to speed it up. So in order to speed something up, it needs to be shorter, not longer. And so we're basically going to divide this by 2. So where it says 8, I'm going to drag this side to now where it says 4. In order to do that, we have to turn this on stretch mode. So hit Shift M or left click under audio clips. Right here it says stretch, turn that on. And then now I can left click and time stretch this to 4 bars. Now for the time being, I'm going to hit this little slice tool and just do a vertical slice by left clicking. Okay. So that's going to enable me to treat this as its own thing, even though it's technically not its own thing yet. Okay. Now what we're going to do is pull this tempo back up to 140. But before we do that, go to the top left of the sample, the loop, go to channel settings, and then go to mode and go to stretch mode. So when you turn it on stretch mode, if I change the BPM, it will keep its same shape, so it doesn't move around like before. Okay, so this sounds a little fast now. So now I'm going to go to stretch mode and just drag this out to double the length. And again, it's a little loud, so let's go to the channel rack, turn down that volume. And now what I can do is, now that we have more music behind it, we can hit Control, highlight all this stuff, hit Shift, left click, and then drag it over. Now this is another reason why I don't like producing in the playlist, because it's harder to copy stuff over. It's more arduous as opposed to patterns, which you can grab on easier than individual sounds. So now we need to loop this entire section, hit Control, left click up on that dark black bar thing, and just... And now we can get more creative with the drum timing because we have more time to work with. So let's close the browser. Okay, so let's say I want to add more impacts on the 808. So now I'm going to get a little more creative. This is really beyond the scope of the video, but I'm just moving the 808 around. Now I accidentally just pitched the 808, so let's go to stretch mode, turn that off. So I want to go dum, 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 okay? So I need to find that timing. I'm just going to take out these kicks. Okay, so this snare is not a hip hop snare. So let's start to make this stuff modern. So I'll show you a couple more advanced tricks now, and then we'll get back into the playlist functionality, like how to do automation clips and how to do cool stuff with melody, with loops. What else do we have to do? I'll show you a couple more things, technical things. Okay. So what we're going to do with this snare is, if you missed this, you're going to go to the little icon in the top left, go to channel settings, and under where it says pre-computed effects, just turn the out parameter up. This is going to shorten the sound. It's going to fade the sound out. So it's not like, just not a long sound. It's not like, it's like, now this isn't the right sound anyway, but in more modern trap, you would do what's called a bounce snare. So you would go to, let's say, a half beat, hit shift, and you would duplicate the snare. Now this snare is, the tonality of it kind of says stop. We don't want this snare technically, but in reality, what you would do for trap, if you had a shorter 808 type of snare, you would just duplicate it over. You would do something like that, but that's not the right snare sound. That's why I said the stock sounds are not built for trap, period. Now keep in mind, I turned the 808 down so we didn't get ear fatigue, but if you crank up the 808, you're gonna get that distorted type of. No, that's way too loud. Now let's show you how to do stuff with melody loops, okay? So here's where you would use these other buttons on the playlist. So the first button I'm going to use is this slice tool. So you really have to understand what making unique does. Make unique doesn't make that individual thing unique. It just clones the pattern. So we're going to hit shift left click to do vertical slices with the slice tool. And then what we need to do is on each of these clips, we need to hit the top left, go to channel settings and go, and actually that's not the right one. Go to the top left, go to make unique as sample. So it resaves only this clip, this highlighted in red clip. It resaves that as just that. It's not the entire loop. And that's what make unique as sample does. All right, so we're gonna do that for each sample so that we can manipulate it separately per each sample. Now it's tedious. I wish there were I wish FL just had an easier way to do this, but this is just how we do it right now. So all of these are considered different sounds, and we could do different things to each sound. Like I can click here, go to channel settings, and I can reverse the sound. Now you can't even tell it's reversed. All right, so we can reverse that sound. No, it's not clipping because we have a soft clipper on the master. So you might have to go back in the live stream a little bit to see why it's not technically clipping. Now we're clipping in theory, but it's preventing it from clipping in a creative way. So we could do cool things to this, like go to channel settings. You could run it through some pre-computed effects. There's a gazillion things you could do to it at this point, like add a stereo delay, which is not so evident. Let's do something that's evident. Let me see what effect. Now this is not going to sound cool, but you're hearing how it's treating that sound differently from the first sound. So reverse is usually your main thing, or you could do time stretch. Let's reverse this one because it has more going on. Also, what you could do is make it so that it cuts off. So this is the difference between audio and MIDI. I can tell it to immediately cut off the sound. So I can left click and hide that noise, and it will just stop the whole sound. And this actually makes it sound more like a Boy Wonder type flow. Let me change up this kick pattern. Okay, so we're taking these basic stock sounds and making them sound cooler. Now, another function of the playlist that you need to understand is how to use automation. I don't want to harp on automation just yet as far as the whole track, because you're going to not understand automation until we get into the effects. What's up, Soundslinger? Just saw you hopped in. And everybody else who's here. How many people are even here? I always click on the wrong thing every single time. All right, so we got the whole 187 Snoop Dogg gang in here. Oh, now it's 191. But so that loop came from my best friend Jacob's sounds. So I just highly recommend you guys go to octaplugin.com because he's really the homie as far as business wise. He's solid. His sound design is really good, and I like his sound process. We recorded sounds for 2 days up in Montreal, Canada. I saw his process from the beginning, and he's for the community. That's what I like the most. So that's where that loop came from. Now, the rest of let's close out the browser. So again, for those who just joined, we're going over each of these 5 buttons at the top that you only need to know about FL. So this first button is the playlist button. Second button is the piano roll button. The third button is called the channel rack. Fourth button is called the mixer. The fifth button is the browser. So we're still on button number 1 right now, and I'm showing you how deep you can go with each of these. And this is why I said some of the pros, they overlook all these little fundamental things. And this is what unlocks new creativity, is just knowing these little nuanced things that can open up something. So that's why, I know a lot of pros are even watching today, because going over fundamentals is key, even if you think you know it all. So let's talk about the buttons over here. Now the playlist options, I don't really think anything was turned on. I'm trying to think if I have any special settings turned on. I don't think I do. I think in the piano roll we do. So once we get to the piano roll, I'll show you some settings that you need to have turned on. So you can just screen cap this. Again, my time segments are on 4 bars. All this stuff's turned on that you see. I don't think I mess with that. I think it's all default. Yes. So once we get into making patterns, we'll get into the other stuff. The next thing you need to understand mainly on this main screen is just automation. So automation is how you move stuff over time. Now, for now, the only thing we're going to automate is volume. Now, FL Studio is very different from every other DAW. It's not your typical DAW. And so automating is very different in FL. So let's say we want to automate the 808. So here's a little trick to get more animation out of your 808. Let's go to the 808 sound in the channel rack right here. Find the 808 channel volume. You want to right click and create an automation clip. Okay, now you also want to, again, once you get the hang of automation, make sure you just get in the habit of right clicking and copying that initial value. Okay, so right click and copy that value. Okay, because in FL Studio, it doesn't tell you what you're doing. Like if you're moving a filter, it won't tell you the frequency that you're cutting off. It just gives you a random percentage, which doesn't make any sense. So so I don't want to complain. So my point is, let's right click a point over here. And again, make sure your snap to grid is on something simple like a beat or half beat. So I just right click the point in. So the volume of the 808 is going to go up over time and then slowly down. But that's not what I want it to do. So I'm only pull this up so that I can make another dot pretty easily, another node. So I'm going to right click to add another node in here. And notice how if I didn't do that before, I probably would have made it harder to work with. So I'm going to tell this node to be 0 volume and then right click, and then it's going to go back to regular volume. So now what I'm going to do is right click these nodes at the top because we don't want it to go to 100% volume. That's not where it was. So let's right click and let's hit P to paste. Okay, so that adds the correct value so that your automation doesn't change the volume of your sound. So that's something you have to get in the habit of doing, is right clicking that first value and hit copy. So listen to the 808. It's going to swell in volume because the automation is telling it to go up. Now here's another shortcut about the playlist. If you right click where it says track 11, you can right click and hit U to move this up. And this is important for me visually because I want to know what's affecting what. And if the automation clip is 5 tracks away from the 808, it might get confusing. So I like to have any automation directly under that specific thing. And FL Studio 20 added this feature where you can right click and hit G to group things up under things. So what this allows you to do, let's say the automation's like gaudy and it's in the way. I can right click, hit G, and then hit this little up arrow and it disappears from the screen. So that's really helpful for like stacking up a bunch of automation or like a bunch of vocal takes that just look terrible on the screen. You can just right click, hit group, or right click, hit G to group that sound to the sound above it, to the track above it. So again, if I right click, hit G, it groups whatever that track is directly to the track above. So it tells it that it's like a child of the track above. And then you hit this little up arrow and it's out of your way. Okay, so you can create really cool 808 stuff like this. So it's on. Wom, wom. Okay, so that's what you can do with audio. You can do it with MIDI as well, but it's easier to see with audio. Okay, so that's automation in a nutshell. I'm trying to think what else we can automate that needs to be automated. Nothing really needs automation. I guess maybe these little brrr can get automated. Now I don't want to overly do stuff that I don't need to do. But if you go here, let's go to the channel rack. I forget what this sound's even called. This sound's called the Attack Tap 01. So you see how I just went to the channel rack and all my sounds apparently just disappeared. Again, I don't know why they made FL this way. I wasn't an engineer behind this. So what happens is it just shows you whatever thing that you're on. So in FL, on part 3, which is called the channel rack, in the top left, it groups stuff. So if you ever get lost, change this little black bar to all. I don't know why they do it. I guess it's a visual thing so stuff doesn't get overwhelming. but it actually confuses people more than it helps. Again, one of those design features about FL that I don't know why they did it that way. So I didn't make FL, so I can't really, I can't comment on that. So you're like, okay, where did my kick drum sound go? So you change this back to all. And then you can also group this. You can group sounds, and we'll do that when it comes to that part, which is part 3. We're only on part 1 right now. You can group things in the channel rack. So right now I just want it on all so I can see everything, all the sounds in my project are right here. And we're looking for tap 01, I think it was. Tap, 01 part 1. So we're going to go to the channel rack and right click the channel volume, create an automation clip. Now some people, okay, I'm trying to show you all the stuff you can get wrong just in the case that it happens. So some people move their automation clips around. Let me show you why that's a bad idea. So in short, like FL remembers the last value that something was on. So let's say it was like this. Okay, and it's the last value that it sees is a low volume. Okay, so I turn the volume up and then it's a low volume. So listen to when it comes back around, it's going to sound quiet. Let me solo this so we can hear it. Now notice when you hear it again, it's going to be quiet. Now they must have fixed it. Of course, they probably fixed it. Okay, they must have fixed it. But before, what would happen is it listens to the last value because there's nothing here. So it doesn't know what volume to even be. It's like, okay, what volume am I at this point? Am I 0? Am I 100? So let me see if I did it in reverse. Maybe because it reads the left value. No, I think they fixed it. But before, it used to not know what value to play. So long story short, keep your automation clips starting from the beginning if you can, all the way to wherever your thing is. It's just easier to keep a track of that. Now, since I moved the values around, I don't remember where that knob was. So now I have to go back to tap 1, okay, in the channel rack. Let's say you move this around so much that you forgot where the volume even started. I can, for emergency sake, go back to the channel rack and I can go to tap 1 and tap 1 part 1, which is right here. I can set it to wherever it was, like somewhere around here. Right click, hit C to copy that value, okay? And then I can right click the first node and hit P to paste it so it goes back to normal. So that's something that you're gonna have to get used to in FL is copying the values whenever you use automation because it doesn't know where to be. So you have to tell it where to be. All right, so for this one, let's just make this do like a simple swell or something like this. Let's make it go down in volume to up in volume. And again, it doesn't go up to 100%, so let's paste that value. Now, I don't think this is the right. Oh, I forgot. You know what? That's okay. I see what happened. So I think my theory was right. I forgot we separated those sounds. So that's what was happening. They're two different sounds. So let me think what I could do to make this simpler for the video's sake. I could consolidate this. I might as well show you now. Okay. So this is a perfect lesson by accident. So when you right click track 9, because technically these are two different samples. So when I was automating the volume, it was only automating it for one of these two sounds, either the left side or the right side. And I forgot that I separated those sounds a while ago. So let's say you want it to affect all of those sounds, whatever it sees on this. What you can do is consolidate this track. So if you right click track 9, go to consolidate this track from track start, it will combine these different samples into one sample. And just keep it on the default stuff. All right, so now it's a whole different sample and it combines all these things into one thing, okay? So now what I can do is go to the channel rack and I can now automate this where it says track 9 consolidated. So let's right click, create an automation clip. So now I can affect all those sounds. So again, it looks disorganized right now. So let's right click, hit U to pull this up. Because whenever I automate something, I want it to be right next to something. Or you could right click, hit D to pull stuff down. Now notice FL Studio by default, it groups whatever the tracks were that you consolidate underneath the master consolidation. So all that means is those two tracks that we had before, you can hide those by default. But we also need to add this automation clip in as a group. So you hit right click G, okay? And then you can hit right click U to pull it up as a subcategory. All the geeky talk aside, just right click, copy that first value and then paste. So now it's swelling in volume. Okay, so I just wanted to swell in a concave type of shape. And the reverse adds to that effect as well. But you can do it with volume. So let's add another little swell over here. So let's say you're lazy like me and you don't want to keep drawing in stuff. You can grab the slice tool up top, slice it at an even amount, in this case at the 2-bar mark. You can grab a paint tool, right click to get rid of the automation clip. You can hit Control to highlight the automation clip, and you can hit Control B, which latch paste usually, but it's because I had it on loop mode, it didn't latch paste. So you would hit Shift, okay, left click, and just drag that automation over. So now hit Control, left click and highlight your area, go to song mode, hit space bar to go. Let's take out the snare because that snare is very EDM. That snare just makes it super EDM sounding. That's why you got to be careful with your sound selection. So let's just use a snap for now. Let's just turn the snap up. So you can make different style beats doing your beats this way. It's just a matter of getting used to nudging stuff around, cutting things, just getting used to those tools, because you can make really cool concepts in here, even if you're used to making beats in the traditional sense. So this is just a different way of making beats. So let's say you wanted to mute the snare, but you right click and everything's back to normal. What you can do is use this mute tool up here, this little speaker with the X through it, and you can left click and highlight the snare, and that mutes the audio. So you don't have to turn the track off, you could just turn the audio off. And sometimes when you record it, it automatically mutes the sound. So just don't forget to go up to the mute tool and turn your sounds on and off when you need them. So that's how you, if they're grayed out like that, that's how you turn them back on. Okay, now let's liven this track up a little bit. So those are the basics of the playlist. I'm trying to think of anything else you would actually need. So let's say you kind of screw up. Now, if you wanted to zoom in and you don't have a mouse pad like me that can just do this, you can use these little buttons up at the top left to either make stuff vertical, or you can grab on the left side of this little bar and zoom in that way. But let's say you accidentally zoom into like some crazy format like this or something like this, and you're like, crap, my screen looks terrible. You can go to the top left of the playlist, go to View, and go to Resize All Tracks and go to 100%. Now, actually, no, what that does is, I have to show you what it does. Let's say you have something like this. That's what I meant to do. And then something like this, where like some stuff's big, some stuff's small. You go to the playlist, go to View, and go to Resize All Tracks back to 100. So it makes everything equal in its vertical length. And then you would use that top right icon to left click and drag it until it's, you know, to your liking. So this is the size I like, where you can see everything, but it's not too small and not too big. Okay, I'm trying to think what else would I use in the, I guess the one last thing I could show you is the slip tool, which is really good for remixing and different things. So the slip tool allows you to move the audio starting point. Now, I think the difference is we made all these unique, so there's no other audio to slip to, but let's grab the original loop right here. Now, the slip tool, what it allows you to do is left click and just drag the audio around. Okay, and what that means is if I chop this up into different bars, like even like, I'll just kind of show you what this means by itself. So this is not time sync, this isn't time stretch, we're just slicing stuff. This is a quick way to remix your ideas and make it sound like a DJ or like a really complex work. So go to slip tool and just move the audio around. And what it does is it moves the audio of whatever's highlighted. So I'm moving that audio to a different position in the song. And this is how you create really unique combinations. So the loop doesn't originally go like this. So it's really cool to use that when sampling. Just a little quick tip. The slip tool is highly underrated. And Control X also cuts things out as well, if I didn't mention that before. I think, what else didn't I mention in the playlist here? I think that's pretty much it. As far as the playlist, I mean. Now, a couple things I meant to mention actually. On the left side in FL Studio 20, here's where everything is accounted for. You have things called patterns, which are when you use the channel rack stuff. And then you have something called audio clips, which is everything else, which is just like kick sounds, snare sounds, loops, whatever. That's audio because you could visually see the waveform. Whereas patterns are when you combine different MIDI stuff, okay? So let's go to the audio clips. Let's highlight the top where I just left clicked, hit shift, highlight everything down. You can right click and you can change the color. So if you want to be more visually appealing, let's make it go from like pink or something like this and to orange, like it's some kind of orange color. So now it just visually looks cooler. So that's something you can use for your Instagram videos or like your social media videos, just to make it pop a little bit more, make it more appealing. I wouldn't recommend changing the grid color. You can also change the grid color, but I just would recommend against it because it's just, they pick like the perfect color. Ironically, like this blue kind of cobalt color is like the best color in my opinion. But you can go to view, you could change your grid color. So one time I made the mistake of, I changed the color and I was so freaked out because I didn't know how to change it back. But let's say you want to do an Instagram video or something. I can make the whole grid black. But the problem is I don't know where a bar is and where a beat is or anything like that. So if you ever do that by mistake and are scared, you can go to view, grid color, and go down here where it says D for default, and then hit accept. And you'll wipe the sweat off of your forehead because I've done that before where I changed the grid color temporarily and I'm like, how do I go back? So you can even make it like, let's do like a teal type of color. Now it looks terrible. It's better in my head. It looked much better in my head. So that's why I said they somehow pick like the perfect color for a grid. So shout out to the team at FL. Okay, so let's move on to the next step, which is the piano roll. Now all this stuff is just pure audio. There's no notes drawn in. It's just sounds stacked up. So let's say you want to add like a melody of some sort. I'm trying to think. What can we add here? Okay, let's go to the channel rack. And we need to create our first pattern because a piano roll, whatever we do in the piano roll goes inside of what's called a pattern. Okay, so all your MIDI stuff goes inside of a pattern, whereas audio does not necessarily go inside of a pattern. Okay, you'll slowly understand what that means over time. You don't need to know what that means right now. So let's just go to the third button here, and that's called the channel rack. I might as well show you a shortcut. So up top here, you notice how it says audio. It's only showing me the audio on my track. It's not showing me the automation. It's not showing me the synth sounds. So I need to click here and go to all so that I have everything accounted for. Now double click everything, this little thing right here, just double click it so it highlights everything. Hit Control L and that will send everything. You notice this little number to the left that sends everything to the mixer into its own mixer channel, which is really, really, really important because when you're editing, you want to edit sounds individually. If you have to edit a hi-hat, you don't want to cut out frequencies in a kick. So that's why you separate the sounds. Now, if you don't see these numbers to the left, hit Alt-M to hide or reveal those numbers. Okay, so if you don't see those, hit Alt-M. And if you don't see anything happening, it's probably because you're in an older version of FL Studio. You need to upgrade. I would highly recommend you upgrade. There's so many reasons and benefits as to why you should upgrade. They fixed a lot of the errors that were in FL Studio, a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. Yeah, shout out your country, Argentina in the building. So that sends all the sounds to the mixer. So if I click on the mixer, now my mixer is named and color coded to all those things I just had in the channel rack. So now I can see, oh, here's my snap right here. Here's my kick. Where's my kick? Right here. My kick's right here. And now I can edit individual sounds in the mixer, which is really important because let's say I want to add distortion to the 808. I can just solo the 808 and add distortion as opposed to add distortion to all my sounds. Okay, so let's go to the channel rack because in the channel rack, here's where we start to build out patterns. So to use piano roll, again, you have to use a pattern because piano roll houses what's called MIDI, and MIDI is the language of music. That actually is probably not the definition of MIDI, but MIDI tells like plugins what to do. Okay. So we first have to add a plugin. So let's add Octave. Shout out to Jacob. He has this new plugin called Octave Deluxe. All right, so now we have Jacob's plugin open. He's the one who called in earlier, by the way. Now the difference between his sounds and something like Omnisphere is his sounds may not have 10,000 sounds in here. Now he has close to 10,000. He's a lot more sounds now that he's added those expansions. But the main thing is that his ear has curated the right sounds for hip hop, trap, and R&B, whereas Omnisphere just has a bunch of sounds. Period. It doesn't really know what hip hop sounds like, whereas Jacob has the ear for hip hop. So he's done work. I think he did stuff with Russ. He did stuff with Bryson Tiller, I think, if I'm getting that right. He even worked alongside Travis Scott and Kanye West for some film projects. He did film score for Travis Scott's documentary, and he did a piece for Kanye West when he was in the filming world. So his ear is just different. So again, I can open up Omnisphere right now, go through 1,000 sounds and not find anything that inspires me. Whereas his sounds, you don't need to go very far to find inspiration. And that's the difference between our plugins, because we're producers who made plugins. So that's at octaveplugin.com. Let me link it now before I forget, because I already know I'm going to forget. So I might as well add it to the description here so you guys don't get left hanging. So it's Octave Plugin. Let me add the www. octaveplugin.com. I'm pretty sure click here for Octave Deluxe. That's just for everybody on the replay, so I don't forget to do it because I already know I will. Okay, so I already found a sound that perfectly matches. I only really need that one sound. I mean that one note. So let's hit Control L, get in the habit of doing that so it sends it to the mixer. Let's right click, go to piano roll. Now we're on pattern 1. So if you ever get lost, it tells you the pattern number right here underneath this little spectrum thing. It says pattern 1. So we're on pattern 1. So let's right click, go to piano roll. And let's just play this note. Now it's not playing. So you're like, I'm drawing in the notes, but it's not playing. It's because we didn't tell the pattern to be played in our entire canvas. So we need to add this pattern to our canvas. So let's go back to the first button here, the playlist. And again, this whole beat was made with audio clips. Audio clips are different than patterns. So now we need to click on what's called a pattern, which houses MIDI. Okay, MIDI and audio are two separate things. They're not the same thing. Okay, so we can now drag in pattern 1, which houses MIDI into the playlist. So let's right click and let's insert a track above. And let's just left click the pattern and drag it in. And now hit spacebar. And that's the bounce we needed for this track to become alive. That's why I said all his sounds are custom made for hip hop, trap, and R&B. It's just one note. I don't even need to do a lot. Now we have the bounce we need. Now, if that gets too obnoxious, what I could do is just move this over and have that come in over time. Now, again, we have so many things going on here. What I'm going to do is group all this stuff so it's easier to manipulate this stuff. So let's hit right click, hit G, so that this is all one group of audio stuff. Because again, copying and pasting this can get a little crazy. So let's right click, hit G. So now I collapsed all that stuff. So now it's like one big block of stuff, basically a pattern, I guess, almost like a pattern. This is basically what a pattern is. A pattern consolidates all the information into one little thing you can move around. So notice how all these tracks, I have to highlight every single track in order to copy it and move it over, which can get very tedious. So let's hit Shift and grab that stuff and move it over. So now that Jacob sound is going to come in over time as opposed to right away. Okay, so that is the piano roll. Now we didn't get into everything about the piano roll. Let's add, maybe let's go to pattern 2 and let's see if we can add like a more complex melody. I don't want to get too complex because the loop is doing a lot. So whenever you go to pattern 2 in your channel rack, you can left click in your playlist and it will add whatever pattern that you're on to that playlist. So you don't always have to drag it from the left side. That's just one way to do it. Okay, so again, we're on song mode. Now notice I dragged the pattern in before it had notes. Okay, I do that a lot because I want to hear the changes in real time. So I go to song mode a lot when I'm in. So there, okay, I'm saying a lot. There's pattern mode and then there's song mode. Pattern mode will only play whatever pattern you have highlighted over here. So if I have pattern 1 highlighted, it's only playing pattern 1. If I have pattern 2, nothing plays because there's nothing there. If I go to song mode, it plays the entire canvas of sound. But what I like to do is grab a pattern and listen to it in song mode. So when I make changes in the pattern, you can hear it live in song mode. So I can change stuff as I go. So let me just hit Control to highlight, hit Shift to left click. And now let's go back to the channel rack so that we can change the MIDI inside of the piano roll for pattern 2. So again, the piano roll is right here, that button there. So now I'm going to try and make this sound more melodic, even though it's more of a percussive, tonal, percussive sound. Let's try and make it like a melody. So I'm gonna ding, 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 ding. So same principles, change the snap to grid. I like to keep mine on 1/2 beat in the piano roll. And let's hit Control, left click and highlight this. Now we have videos on melody and how to think about melodies and all this. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory essentials. Okay, that's going to take you to our music theory courses. Let's hit Control down to move this down an octave. So I'm hitting Control, left click and highlight this. Hit Control down. Oh, you know what? Okay, so you see how it just reset? Let's go back to the playlist. So what happens is my melody was longer than what I programmed it out in the playlist. So long story short, we need to go back to the playlist and right click the ending so we can get rid of it and then drag the edge out so it plays the entire portion, because before I only had it looping that first portion. And then it goes dum dum dum, so it ends on that note that we played before. Now at the end, let's say you want to make it different. So let's click here, make it unique. And let's say you want to change a couple notes, so it's not the same exact melody each time. And now what you could do, make sure you're in song mode, you can left click up at the top and it will start at that point. And I just want this to end on the same notes. Now let me show you another secret in the piano roll. If you double click, now we're in the playlist, and now that we have a pattern, you can go inside a pattern. So you can double click to open up the piano roll of that specific pattern. So again, it's not playing that specific spot. So get in the habit of hitting stop twice for FL to find its spot. So now I'm going to show you a couple piano roll hacks just for hip hop in general. There's a lot of piano roll things to do. But right here, let's highlight that note, hit Alt A and change your range to 1. Okay. This is the arpeggiator function. And then change your time multiplier. This is just a fun way to kind of glitch your melody. So it's a soft sound, so you have to kind of focus in on it, but it goes brrr. Okay, so just listen into it. It goes brrr. Now let's make it more apparent by making the velocity go up. Okay, so you can right click. Here's another thing I forgot to mention in the playlist. You can right click these little green dots to solo and unsolo sounds. Now the reason you want to use the channel rack for a lot of stuff, and we're not on channel rack yet. We're only on step 2 out of 5. I need to move a little bit quicker here, 'cause I have to, actually we're good on time. Okay, so Actually, before we get to the channel rack stuff, let me not confuse you yet. We're still in the piano roll. So that's one way you can add spice to your melody. Now what I'm going to do is drag this note here out so it's a little bit longer. And let's say your note looks something like this, where it's just a little bit over the bar. Okay, so what you can do is actually grab your slice tool and right click to get rid of what's called the excess. Okay, so now it's going to cut it perfectly to the bar. Now FL remembers the characteristics of the last note, the last MIDI note that you touch. So that's how you have to left click it so that FL knows that it wants to copy the same characteristics of that note. Because if I click this little short note, it's only going to make short notes. If I click the long note, it's going to make long notes, and it's going to copy all the other stuff about that note too, like the panning, the cutoff values and all this. If I click this little tiny note, it's only going to make tiny notes. So if you're having a problem with the length of your notes, cut it perfectly to the bar, then left click it so FL Studio knows you want stuff only lined up to the grid. There's other shortcuts to correct it, but I don't want to overly stuff the shortcuts down your throat. Pause. Let's highlight this, hit Control, left click, highlight those, hit Alt A. And here we're going to go to range and change this to 3. So now it's going to play 3 octaves. This is more of a creative thing. It's not a necessary thing, but let's hit Control down so we can hear the notes. Whoops. Let me just solo this spot. Okay, so it does like a little quick arpeggio, just a little creative way to add something different to your melody. I'm pretty sure Mario Judah saw my Playboy Cardi melody video because he used that technique in his latest Be Ya video that he put out, because his melody is like an arpeggiated melody. Shout out to Mario Judah. I don't know if he watches this channel or what. Let's zoom up. Now here's some other things you want to get used to in the piano roll. Control A selects everything. Control Shift allows you to select individual things. So you can select and deselect stuff by hitting Control Shift. So if you want to make small changes to like some notes, but not all your notes, you can hit Control Shift and just hold it down to select or deselect stuff. Alt is your best friend when it comes to nudging stuff around. So you can hit Alt right, or you can hit Alt and left click and drag stuff around. So let's say your melody is a little too on the grid. You can visually do it. I wouldn't recommend you do it in the piano roll. I'm just showing you how to do it. But you can hit Alt and left click. So now it's a little bit behind the beat. So Alt is going to be your nudge best friend. I'm trying to think of really important shortcuts though. There's a lot more shortcuts. You can go to Tools, and you can go to these tools at the bottom like Strum Tool. We didn't use Strum Tool here. I have videos on this stuff in our melody course. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/melody magic to learn more, because there's a lot of the stuff that isn't really, you don't need to know it about FL. It's just you need to know it's there. So you can go to Tool, and you can mess with these other tools like Strum Tool, and that's pretty much it. Strum Tool and the arpeggio are my favorite ones. There's other shortcuts, but I just realized the piano roll is really deep. So I'll show you how to do it. I'm not showing you that this is necessary, so don't get obsessed with these features here. But if you go to the top left, you go to what's called helpers. Just turn ghost channels on. You'll understand why that's important later. You don't need to know everything as to why. Just turn that on. There's also something under helpers called scale highlighting. I keep mine on black notes, and there's a reason for that. Shout out to Roger. There's a reason I keep it on black notes. What's up, DJ Wraith? It's because I want to know that the black spots on my visual piano screen are the black notes. And that's really important for like memorization, because when you're playing an instrument, you usually learn via the visuals of it. So some people, okay, they put their helpers on different scales. So for example, if you're writing in this key of A major, you would go to major scale. Okay, but we're not done. You have to go back to helpers, go to scale highlighting, and now you have to tell it what the root key is. So G major, for example. So it highlights in white. You'll notice in the background it changed. It highlights in white all the notes that are in G major. Okay, so that's one way you can get used to notes, but the problem with that approach is that you're going to start learning visually, and that can mess you up long term. So I wouldn't recommend that for long term use at all. But it's just one way you can kind of break out the box if you're stuck for like one day or not. You could change the scales that you want to use. Again, we go over all this stuff in our music theory courses. You don't need to memorize all that. Just go to scale highlighting. I like mine on black notes. It just is the way I like it. Now go to view. I would recommend you change the keyboard style, because by default they only show you like the keyboard in a different way. So go to keyboard style. I like mine on classic. And key labels, I like mine on all, because I think by default they have theirs on root notes, and it's like, okay, where am I at? Like I don't know what these notes are. There's no label. And now the problem with that, companies think that that's beneficial, because they're like, oh, some people don't want their notes labeled because it messes them up. But in reality, nobody produces sideways. Like I'm not playing my piano like this. Not playing it sideways, like up and down with my fingers going up the keyboard. So when you're playing a piano, you're usually facing the piano. So having stuff not labeled doesn't really help you in a horizontal world. So we're going to go to view and go to key labels and turn on all notes. Highly recommend turning that on. So I can go, okay, I want to play the A note. I know exactly where A is. I don't have to like figure out the shape by turning my head sideways and going, okay, that's A. It's going to take up too much time. Okay. What else is important in the piano roll? It's pretty much it. And then let's say you wanted to make your notes look cooler. So you can right click, don't left click, right click. Okay. The little top area here, and you could change the note color. So let's change this to like some type of purple color. Now I have purple notes, and it's just visually pleasing to have fun sometimes with different color notes. Let's change them to pink. So if you just want to spice it up a little bit. Now, when you left click, that's a different thing. This is called MIDI channels. That's not the same thing. So be careful with that. There's more to the piano roll, but we can't demonstrate it on everything. So I'm trying to think what we can add to this. So let's go back to the channel rack, and I'm only adding this sound just so we can use it for demonstration purposes. Let's click the little plus button, and here's where we start adding plugins. So let's add 3X OSC. And again, this is a sound source. I'm going to turn oscillator 2, oscillator 3 down. We're going to hit Control L, so this goes to the mixer as its own thing. And we're going to right click, go to piano roll. So if you ever get lost and you're like, how do I add notes to this sound? You either hit the piano roll button, or you just right click, go to piano roll. I prefer right clicking and going to piano roll. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to create slides in portamento bends. Now this is only for image line made plugins. This doesn't work on third-party plugins. That's why I kind of left this towards the end. Whoa, that's a really high note. So let's hit Control down. And I also meant to mention the bottom here. So if you don't see this little graph with those vertical lines, you want to look for this little ellipses in the middle of your screen. Left click and drag that up. This will show you the different parameters of MIDI, like velocity. There's other parameters to MIDI outside of velocity, okay? Which is just how loud a sound is for the most part. So let's turn this, let's go back to the channel rack, turn the channel volume down because it sounds loud. And now I'm going to show you how to create pitch bends. Now this may or may not sound musical, but I'm showing you this just so you understand how to do it. Let's hit Control down. This is too high. So that's the tone we're adding. And let's say I wanted to go up 1 octave. So let's add another note. That's D sharp. And let's say we wanted to go to this D sharp. So I want that D sharp to go to the other one. Let's set it back to default because I can't really see the notes. Okay, so I'm going to left click and drag this note so that it overlaps the next note. And then what you have to do is double click on this note and change it to a slide note. So what it will do is take it from this note and it will pitch bend up to this note over that amount of time. So it goes whoop. But that only works for image line plugins because they're built to be integrated with FL Studio. It doesn't work for other plugins. Maybe one day, but not right now. So that's how you do pitch bends. That's more of what's called a portamento bend. But, you know, pitch bends can get more minute. I'm not going to get into every little detail about the nuance of the craft of pitch bending. But just keep in mind that's how you do it. Now, there's also a portamento button, which is basically the same thing as pitch bend. So that's that. I'm trying to think of anything else you would need to know about the piano roll. I keep mine on the pencil tool in the piano roll. That's just my style. I rarely slice notes. I rarely touch anything except that pencil tool in the piano roll. That's my workflow. Another cool thing you could do in the piano roll is go to the little what's called stamp button, and you can pick from different chords. So let's say you're uninspired one day, you can just choose from there a gazillion things you can add. So these are chords, these are scales. The difference is that chords are like things you'll play on a piano. A scale is like a series of notes that sound good together. So you wouldn't, I'm not going to tell you what not to do and what to do, because that can hinder you more than anything. So let's just stamp in a chord, okay? So it says chords right here, chords. We're going to grab a minor 7th chord, okay? So you could just add this in. Now, you could drag it in. This is more for inspiration purposes. So I'm hitting shift up, shift down to move the notes up or down. I think that sounds pretty cool. You can hit control up and control down to move stuff up or down an octave. Oh. Let's make the top note D sharp. Hit control up. It doesn't sound right, so let's pull it back down. Okay, so now you have that. Now I'm just showing you this so you understand. So hit control, highlight it, hit alt G to ungroup the notes, it's called, because by default they're grouped together. And let's say you want to pitch bend the entire chord. You can add another note, you can double click, turn it into a slide note, and it will pitch bend the chord. So a lot of people don't know that it can do stuff like that, but that's only for image line made plugins. That's how you can add really cool, like little in-between stuff. And here's another function. If you hit Control A or you select a certain amount of notes, you see this little double arrow thing right here. So sometimes you'll make a melody, but it's too long. It might be like double the length. So what you want to do is hit Alt and left click and drag it out until it fits the proper length. If you don't hit Alt, it's just going to be like freestyle and it's not good because it's going to sound bad. So hit Alt, left click, and drag that out. So those are the main functions I can think of in the piano roll. Everything else in here I don't really use. I meant to go over quantize. So let's say you have something you're playing stuff by hand and it's a little bit off the grid. You can hit Alt Q and do it that way, change your quantize settings, or you can hit Control Q, which is like a harder quantize. Okay, so another tool I kind of got used to, depends on your style of production, but let's say there's a gap between C sharp and E and you need this gap filled. What you can do is hit Control L, whoops, or Control, why is this not working? I don't think my buttons are working today, but it's definitely Control L. Something's wrong with my keyboard, okay, but it's definitely Control L. And what that does is it fills in the gap from here to here. Let's see why that's not working. Let's go to Tool and let's go to Articulate, Quick Legato. Oh, maybe I'm hitting it wrong. I thought it was, no, I know I'm right. Or is it Alt L? Maybe it's Alt L. No, Control L used to do it a lot. No, yeah, it's Control L. But for whatever reason, let me see something here. Let me make this more jagged edge. Let's do something like this, because this is how I would normally play, and then I might want to fill in the gaps. So let's do it this way. I'll highlight everything, hit Control L. So you see how everything like snapped to the nearest note length? I'll do it again. So you see how it's like random note lengths, and then everything becomes one note length. It fills in the gap or cuts off the sound. So that's Control L. It does that by default. Okay, now there's another function which is Alt L, which is a little bit different. And again, we don't need to obsess about the details, but you could also use Alt L, but it's a different type of that function. Those are the main functions of the piano roll. Last function is the bottom section here. Again, that ellipses. So you left click, you drag that up. And you can click here where it says Control, and you can change different things about the note. So I'll exaggerate this just so you can understand. So you can change this to pan, note panning, and I can have each note do a different panning position. And again, this only works for image line plugins. So I can pan different notes. I can go here to change the velocity, so I could have certain stuff louder and quieter. And it gives it more dynamic, it's called. You can also give it what's called a filter cutoff. This is only for FL stuff. And basically, the lower this is, the more muffled it's going to sound. It's going to sound like putting my hand over my mouth type of sound. So So if this note is lower, that muffled sound. Okay, and then you have something called resonance. You don't need to know what that is if you don't even know what filter cutoff frequency is. Then you have something called fine tune pitch, which means I'm detuning the individual note. So I'm changing the pitch of the actual note. Now let's say you're like, oh crap. Again, remember I said whatever you click last, FL Studio remembers. So if I left click on that last note, it copies all the values of that last note, from the fine pitch to the panning to the velocity values. And let's say you don't want your notes to be panned to the right. Let me show you what that would sound like. It's just panned to the right and it's playing the wrong note. So most people don't know how to reset that. What you do is you hit Alt and you left click and drag to reset all the values. Okay, so hit Alt, left click and reset all the values. Just go through your control options and left click, hit Alt and left click those values. Okay, so go through all these and just make sure you're resetting everything. And that way you can click on this note and it will have everything reset back to default. And you won't have anything that has like a random value on it, because that's happened many times. I'm like, why does this note sound weird? It's because that. And what else is on here? I'm trying to think. There's another function. Okay. So another thing is when you hit Shift and you left click, you can do horizontal level matching. So you can hit Shift, left click, and just drag it, and everything will be the level that you set on that first thing. So if I want all the volumes to be low, I hit Shift, left click at the low velocity, and now everything's low. But hit Alt to reset it back to normal. It's really helpful. I wish Ableton had that function, because sometimes I'll play stuff by hand and I don't want the velocities jumping all around. I just want it a stable velocity. But in Ableton, it's not as easy, or I don't know the shortcut for that in Ableton just yet. Okay. So that's the piano roll in a quick little nutshell. One last thing about the piano roll is if you click up top here, you can cycle between the different sounds. So right here, you see those grayed out things? That's called ghost notes, okay? And I turn that function on by going to the piano roll options, go to helpers, and go to ghost channels. If I turn that off, those gray notes disappear. And the purpose for those gray notes is to know the other music that I have per pattern, so that I can harmonize and do cool melodic stuff musically. So that's just a really good feature to have on, period, so that I can do really cool stuff. What else? Okay, so in the piano roll, if you click up top, you can select between different MIDI stuff. So let me just draw in arbitrary notes here. These aren't going to make any musical sense. I'm just drawing them in. And what I can do is cycle up top between Octave Deluxe, which has this MIDI, and then I can go back to 3X OSC, which has the other MIDI. So a quick way to cycle between sounds without going all the way back to your channel rack and then opening up the piano roll that way, you could just left click and select that sound source right there. And that's how you swap between the different sounds. Okay, so let's hit Control X to get rid of that MIDI. And whenever you're done with the sound, you could just right click, hit D for delete, and hit enter. All right, so that way I got rid of that 3X OSC. Okay, so now we're moving into the channel rack. We're moving a little bit faster now. I'm trying to think of what we can do in the piano roll, in the channel rack, because we already have like the whole beat. I'm trying to think. I might let's add like another section over here where we drop out some sounds and then we start using patterns for percussion. So let's hit Shift and let's drag that over. And actually, let's cut out all the sounds. There we go. Let's cut out everything. Let's make it a whole different beat, basically. Hit Control X, highlight all these sounds, hit Control X. So now let's hit Control, left click, and highlight that section. So it's only this new section. It's like a Kanye section right here. But let's say I want a little more control over the rhythm. So let's go to a new pattern, or you can right click and go to Find First Empty Pattern, hit Enter. It's a quick way to find an empty pattern. And I'm going to left click in pattern 4. And I'd rather produce in pattern mode for anything rhythmic. It's just a lot easier in FL Studio for me. Go to channel rack. Go to the snap to grid, go to bar mode. And now we're going to draw this stuff out in bar mode. And we're going to listen to it through song mode, but we're creating in pattern mode. So again, the difference between these sounds and a regular sampler is that audio clips can't have certain controls on them. So the main thing is in the playlist, I can cut the sound off immediately. But if I start using those same sounds in the channel rack, it's not going to just cut off the sound. Like I have to tell it to cut off it in a different way. For example, like when I use the, what was it? With the 808, okay? The 808 cuts off randomly, okay? You can't just cut off an 808 as easily in the channel rack when you're using audio clips, as far as like an audio clip. Now, when you're using a sampler, you can do that a lot easier, but without all the nuances of anything. Let's just highlight a new section and create a new rhythm. So let's collapse all that. Let's go to pattern 4 now. And now I have to pick those sounds and create a new pattern. So now it's a little bit easier, in my opinion, to draw out patterns. Like hi-hat patterns are a lot easier. I could just right click, fill each 2 steps, and I have a hi-hat pattern. It's a lot easier to do, in my opinion. Now, FL is a little confusing because half of it is visible and you're like, why is this side grayed out? I don't know why they do it this way. They show you can add more steps. I kind of understand the concept, but in some ways it's hindering, because in order for me to right click and fill each 2 steps for like a longer period of time, I have to click way over here somewhere and then I have to do it again. So it's like a workflow thing. I haven't found a better way to do it. I would not recommend that you use pattern lengths, because if you use pattern lengths, it only listens for that amount of time. It does like a weird thing. I forget exactly what it does, but I don't like pattern length. No, I don't like using that. Okay, so now we have a basic rhythm. Just right click, fill each 2 steps with those hi-hats. That's a very common time for trap rhythms. Now, the thing about writing in these long rhythms is that you can kind of get lost as to where stuff is. So I really don't like to produce in this long of a pattern. To me, it's actually too long. So let's kind of cut it back. Now, the other part about this is I don't know how many things it should be. So that's why I said it's kind of confusing when you have it half grayed out, half on, and then you don't know where to like make it loop back again. So in short, we have gray stuff, we have red stuff. So it's gray, red, gray, red, gray, red, gray, red. So let's just count it up to 4. 1, 2, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have just enough. I feel like beyond this point, visually, it becomes too complicated to draw in patterns. So I don't like to see all that extra stuff because it's too hard to like understand small changes. Okay. So let's just add this. Let's go to pattern 4, drag that edge in, hit control, hit shift, left click it. I forgot we were in loop mode. Okay, so let's add that in. Now the 808, I want it to be different. So I'm going to add this on a different pattern because I want it to do different stuff. So let's go to pattern 5 now. And let's left click and add that in. So the 808 pattern is going to be a little bit longer. I forgot what I played. It was like, so you notice I can play different notes now. Also, one thing when you're using 808s, right click cut itself whenever you're using an audio clip in the piano, in the pattern channel rack. Okay. Forgot the pattern I played before. Let's go back to pattern 4. So I like to, okay, so I'm giving you like a lot of steps all in one. I usually like to separate the hi-hats on their own track. Hi-hats and percussion are on their own track. And then what I'll do is I'll separate the kicks and the snares on their own track. So let's hit Control X and move that to pattern 6. Let's hit Control V. So pattern 6 will have the kicks and the bouncy snares. Pattern 5 has the 808. Pattern 4 has the hi-hats. And the reason you do that is for arrangement purposes. The same way all these sounds are on a different track. Okay, so we're doing that for arrangement purposes. So that in the case I didn't want hi-hats, I could just right click the hi-hats and get rid of the hi-hats. Okay, so that's a quick way to arrange and make stuff sound cooler over time. Simply separate this stuff. Let's go to pattern 6. We need to add this into the playlist. Just left click. And I forgot the kicks were in the playlist. So let's get rid of the kicks in the playlist. Let's use only patterns this time. Change that pattern of the 808 so it matches the kick. So notice I just double clicked to go into the piano roll. The only thing about the channel rack is it doesn't have a note. It's just telling it the trigger. There's no note value for it. I'm gonna make this 808 and kick line up. Now I know the kick and 808 are low right now. It's just to prevent air fatigue. Okay, so let's go back to pattern 6. Let's add in these snares or snap. So we're in double time. So I meant to mention this earlier. Turn your metronome on if you're not used to counting music, especially for hip hop. So it goes dun, dun, clap. 1, 2, 3, clap. So I'm trying to teach FL, not music production, but basically with trap music, you're gonna put your snare on the 3 and the 7 count. So it's 1, 2, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that's the timing of your drums in trap. So turn your metronome on if you can't count music as easily. Let's find some more percussion. And again, I like to add percussion with the hi-hat type of stuff. So it's percussion, kick, snare, and then 808, usually separated. So let's say you want to record something by hand. So let's highlight that sound, hit record, go to notes and automation. And I'm going to play with my QWERTY keyboard. If you don't have that option on, go to options and go to typing keyboard to piano. And you can play your QWERTY keyboard as a piano. So now I want to add this into the beat. I'm going to turn my metronome on, so I'm on beat. Hit spacebar, and then when you hit record notes to automation, notes and automation, hit stop twice so you go back to the beginning. Okay, so now I've recorded whatever I just played. Turn off recording, click inside, and now you need to quantize what you just played. So hit Alt Q to quantize, hit enter. So stuff's a little bit different in the channel rack. So let me record this by hand. Record notes and automation. Little quirky sounds in here. Again, hit Alt Q to quantize. Now notice you're like, okay, it's reversing, but I don't know how long it's reversing. It's just reversing. That's why some things are good in the playlist, some things are good in the channel rack. Small timing things are good in the channel rack, whereas like reverse sounds and all this are better in the playlist because you can visually see where it's reversing too. No, I don't go live every day, no. Now you can do a lot in the piano, the channel rack. Couple things, and I don't want to bore you to death with all the things you could do because this beat doesn't necessarily need it. Well, let's go to pattern mode so we can only hear what we're writing in this pattern right here. What we can do is start using these tools in the top right to make the sound more unique. One tool they added back, which is really important, is the graph editor. So let's go to the graph editor, click on any specific sound, and you can change different things about it. Similar to how in the piano roll, you could change the velocity, the cutoff, the fine-tune pitch. You could do the same thing here, except you have a new parameter called shift. This is really important for more like boom bap hip hop. So what I like to do, this is basically offsetting the time in individual increments. So I can tell it how much to offset or nudge the sound to the right by just left clicking in a value here. And it creates so much more of a groove. I'm going to turn up the hi-hats. That's how you get that kind of decap swing. Now I'm trying to think of a quick way to demonstrate. Maybe if I hit Alt. So here's without that swing. Tap, 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 tap. It's very just bland. Here's with the swing. Let me turn off the other percussions here. So here's with the swing. Feels alive. It feels like it's moving. Now here's without the swing. Amateur to style. No, not amateur. Depends on the genre. But now here's with all the time nudges. It just adds a life to the hi-hats, okay? So you can use that for more of your hip-hop style stuff. Wouldn't always recommend it for trap. It's not always required for trap. And I'll turn up the sound so it doesn't sound so quiet. But now we get more of a groove. Also in the graph editor, you can change the note tuning. So let's say you wanted the hi-hats to go up in pitch for whatever reason. You could do that here. Actually sounds pretty cool. So doop, 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 doop. There's just little things you could do in the channel rack that make sequencing a lot cooler. Up at the top, you can also use the note slides, but that only works for I wouldn't recommend it doing it here. I would do that in the piano roll if I were you. Also, you can do velocity, so up, down, up, down. It's adding dynamic to your sound. So now we have this really cool, like, climbing hi-hat sound. I'll turn it up so you can hear it. And it just makes the ear like grab onto the sound as opposed to just hearing it. And that's why they say FL is like a cheat code. You can do all this stuff. Now, another thing is called the swing parameter. This is like a nuance you would add to more boom bap stuff. Now we're in double time, so you're really not going to hear the swing until you hear back-to-back notes. So you're only going to hear it right here. So it's a da 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 da. So swing it's kind of a dated sound. It's more for like very specific EDM genres or electronic genres and boom bap. You're rarely going to use swing that much, but it's there. This is the swing knob. What else is here? I know I'm missing one thing I meant to say here. It's going to come back to me randomly. Oh, if you go to the sound itself, go to the wrench tool. Notice I don't have all those other options. That's why I said a sampler is different from an audio clip, because in a sampler, I can nudge this a little to the right, but in here I can't. And so you don't have that control, which is really important for using the channel rack, which is why I said there's a difference between dragging audio clips and dragging them into a sampler. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to drag stuff into the playlist, it's different than if you drag it into the channel rack. So let's start turning these sounds up. So now we're going to move from the channel rack over to, I forgot to mention something. So if you click the plus button down here, here's where you add your plugins. So if you wanted to load up, Octave Deluxe, you would click Octave Deluxe and load that up. If you wanted to load up Hermes, for example, which is my plugin made with my team, you would load that up. Okay, from this section right here. And then in our full course, we'll show you how to add plugins to FL Studio, how to add sounds. I think I'll do that today, but actually I'll do that today because the browser shouldn't take long. All right, just gotta make sure I'm good on time. So how you guys feeling in the chat? You hanging in there? Did you get your PhD in FL just yet? If you could smash the like button so we can help more people live, that'd be dope. Appreciate you guys in the chat. Okay. So we're not done. So in the channel rack, a couple more things I would recommend is understanding MIDI's different from audio. So I'm trying to think of something that we could transpose. So let's go to pattern 3. So here's something that is new in FL. More advanced. So, okay. All this right here is musical stuff. These two melodies right here, pattern 1 and pattern 3. So let's say you're in a different key, like you drag in a loop that's in A minor or whatever. Thanks, Sarah, appreciate you. Like you're in a different key or something like that. So hit Control and hit the pattern mode, hit Control, left click. We're gonna select pattern 1 and pattern 3. And again, let's say I add in a loop that's in a different key. Let's say I'm playing a minor. You don't need to know what all the music theory behind this means. Let's say that I'm playing D sharp minor right now. I don't know what key we're in. I'm just assuming it's a minor key. And then let's say my loop is in A sharp minor, okay, to where I have to pitch it down or up to match. What you can do is highlight the musical stuff, like your MIDI, your melody or your chords, highlight those tracks. Now I'm not highlighting the patterns for the drums because those aren't musical things. Okay, anything with a tone, a musical tone. Now I'm going to right click and go to where it says transpose. And here's where I can move this up or down a key, semitone at a time. So a semitone just means one note up or one note down. In order to go down notes, you have to hit the negative minus button and then hit however many semitones you want to go down. So let's say 3. If you want to go up 3 keys, you hit 3 with no negative button. Okay, so just -3. So all my pattern 1 and pattern 3 stuff is going to go down 3 notes. So that's a quick way if you want to create little key changes in your beat just to kind of spice it up. Let's see what that would even sound like. Now notice how it doesn't match the music here. So let's do transpose. Let's pull it back up 3. So just hit 3, enter. And I know I'm moving a little bit fast, but here's one thing I forgot to say because we weren't on patterns this yet. I can highlight pattern 3 and 1, and I can, now this is actually, that might not work because it's the same instrument. But you can hit Control G to group MIDI. Okay, so I just grouped all that into one thing. So all that MIDI went into one thing. And it lets me do stuff a lot easier. So let's say I want to transpose it now. I just go to pattern 2 and I transpose this. So now it's separate from pattern 1 and pattern 4, which means that it will play this note and then I can make it a different note over here without affecting the first half of the song. So now I can transpose, and let's say I want to pull it up to like a relative key. And I'm trying to think how many notes away that would be. Let's just do 3 up. And it still has the same vibe because we're in a relative key. You don't need to memorize the semitones. I'm just showing you little production techniques you could use. Now notice the sounds got quieter. You're like, why'd they get quieter? That's the difference between dragging them in the channel rack and dragging them into the playlist directly. I don't know why FL changes the values, but that's just what it is. By default, they're like super loud in the playlist, but then when you drag them into the playlist, they're not loud. I think the playlist just turns stuff down to 80%. So now all the drums got quieter. So you would have to re-import the drums so that they have their original volume. See how the drums got quieter? I didn't do anything. And at the end, you can hear it doubled up in volume because I have 2 notes being played. That's why I said FL has some logical stuff that doesn't make any sense. Now let's fix the whole thing about the drums being quiet. Okay, so we're going to go to each pattern and we're going to find the sound that sounds quiet. Like for example, the hi-hats. Right click, hit clone, or hit C to clone. Then we're going to hit Control X, Control V to paste it into the new hi-hats. And now I can turn these hi-hats up without affecting the first half of the song. Okay, so I'm just going to do this for each sound. It is a little arduous, but again, that's why I don't produce with my sounds in the playlist. Let's make sure all our graph editing stuff is still there. Yeah, it is. Okay, so I'm going to do the technical bull stuff. Almost cursed. Technical nonsense here. So right click, hit clone. We're going to hit Control X, Control V. And just basically duplicate all these sounds to where we can turn the volume up. And now we just need to get our kick cloned. Right click, hit C, highlight that specific horizontal thing, hit Control X, Control V, and we can turn this kick up. the 808. That was a kick. So this is kind of beyond the scope. I normally would not be doing this in a song. It's just the way we were showing you how to do stuff today. You would have to do this. But again, that's not how I produce. That's why I said you have to learn FL before you learn how to produce, because they're two different things. Okay, let's turn this stuff up now. Now the 808's still playing the wrong note here. So we need to pitch the 808 up. So that is a tonal thing that I forgot to pitch up. Let's find the 808. So that's pattern 6. We need to go to pattern 6 here. Just right click, transpose, hit 3, pull it up 3 notes. So now it matches the music. Now the difference is that this 808 plays all the way out. So the question is, how do you stop the 808 without going into the piano, you would just right click, go to piano roll. That's one way to do it. And you could, where's our notes? Here's a quick way to do it. You could just add a note and turn the velocity all the way down. It's a quick way to do it without doing a bunch of other steps. Let me add a couple more notes like dun dun. So now I'm just being a producer here. Now again, these are stock sounds, people. We're using like, you know, the sounds that came with FL. I'll show you how to make these a little more vicious. I need to go dum dum. So let's do our trick here. Drag this out. Highlight that note, hit Alt A, change the range to 1. And then change your time multiplier so that it glitches that note. So it goes brum. Okay, so that's how we do that glitchy sound for the 808. And I'll make it more. I'm just trying to get past this channel rack part so we can get to the mixing. And on the left side, this is your pan knob. So if you want to move stuff to the left of your ear or the right side of your ear, that's the little left knob here is the panning. The right knob is the volume, like how loud you want it to be. And that's really it about the channel rack. I don't use all the other functions. There's a lot more you could do here. Like right click stuff, you could solo that thing. So if you only wanted to listen to the 808, you could do it that way. Just right click the little green thing and hit solo. Okay, cool. Now we move to my favorite section, which is the mixer. So that's the 4th button. Again, it comes down to 5 buttons. All these buttons up at the top. This is basically all of FL Studios. It's these 5 buttons right here. Everything else is kind of like in addition to that. So we are on the 4th button out of 5, which is the mixer. So here's where you can account for every single sound. And earlier I showed you how to get stuff into the mixer. You just highlight the sound, hit Control L, and it automatically links it to the mixer. Now the mixing is a craft unto itself, but the main purpose of the mixer is that so you can account for each sound and add different effects to each sound. So let's say I wanted this 808 to sound super distorted. What I could do is go now to the 808 sound, which is on 5, and I can then add on slot 1. And now, oh, here's what I forgot. Your mixer doesn't look like mine. So I like this view. You go up here, you go to compact 2. Because I think by default, they put you on like wide mode, which looks, no. Go to compact 2 and turn on this button that says view extra volume stereo properties. That's really important for mixing. And also click this button that says view swap track inspector. Very important because you can't really mix without that because you can't add plugins. Okay, so that's very important that you have that. Now, some people have this little waveform thing on. I don't like mixing like this. I think it's corny, so I turn that off. What else? It's pretty much it as far as the mixer, but you definitely have to have the stereo view extra volume stereo properties on, and you definitely have to have this view swap track inspector thing on. Okay, and I like compact 2. The other ones they look too not like a real mixer for me. Okay, so on the 808, which is called the power long kick, we're going to go to slot 1. And here's where we start adding effects. Now, the way effects work is from top to bottom. So slot 1 is the first thing happening to the sound. Slot 2 is the second thing happening. And when you learn when you learn how to mix and the importance of the order of mixing, then you'll understand why you would have stuff at the top, stuff at the bottom. That's the whole craft of mixing, is understanding. The same way if I, in Photoshop, if I brighten a picture first and then I add like saturation second, it's going to saturate the brightened picture. Okay, so it's an order of operations. So anyway, under slot 1, let's add something like, trying to think which one would sound cooler. Let's add Fruity Wave Shaper. Now for this style of sound, I usually don't do direct saturation, but I'm not trying to bore you to death. I'm just going to show you what it sounds like. Okay, so let's go to the little cog icon, turn the mix level down a little bit, and then just left click and drag this up. We're going to turn the post level down. Now the goal is to get it to sound like it's saturated or distorted, which it will if you keep pulling that up. Now let me right click to make this more exaggerated because it didn't saturate it the way I thought it would. So if you right click a point in, this is going to sound super distorted. Oh, you know what? It's because the mix level's down. Duh, that's why. Also, you can, again, I don't want to get too deep into mixing knowledge, but you could turn up what's called the pre-gain, so it distorts it even more. So now it's more of a distorted 808. Now I don't like that sound at all. That's why I said sound selection is so important. Okay, so just understand that that's how you would add that sound. Now, also people like Fruity Fast Distort. I've heard people liking this. It's another plugin. See how it adds that rumble sound? And if it's too much, you can pull back the mix level. It's gonna pull it back the post, increase the pre, so it distorts it more. You can switch it to B mode, which is a different style distortion. Now, every plugin is going to give you a different sound. I don't necessarily like this sound for this 808, but I do like that kind of bright tone. But the problem with distortion is that it takes away from the low end. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into mixing. That's how you start to edit each individual sound. So I'm going to take that off because I'm not going to do it that specific way. Shout out to Tony Apex the Original. Happy holidays, much love and respect, brother. Apex with the $10 super chat. Appreciate you. Also, if I didn't mention, this live is only going to last for 24 hours and then it's going to be private. Okay, just letting you know now. So this is a holiday exclusive. Okay, so anyway, what I'm going to do, I think the easiest way to teach you how to use the mixer is to actually use it. So I'm trying to think of anything I would have to explain before I use it. So I rarely touch this little EQ curve at the bottom, but you can, it's a built-in EQ down here. I don't use that a lot. I wouldn't get in the habit of doing it. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but it's you can make mistakes very easily with this. So that's why I say I don't mess with that as much. What else is important about the mixer without digging too deep? I guess the first thing is this grouping sounds. So let's open up another track over here. Let's right click. Let's rename this like reverb. And let's open up another one on 25 and call this drums. So grouping sounds is something that requires what's called routing. So routing, some people, they kind of hear the word routing and they freak out. I'll show you the quick way to route. So we have something called reverb, something called drums. Now on the reverb track, we're going to go to slot 1. We're going to go to Fruity Reverb 2. And then we're going to turn the wet level all the way up, turn the dry level all the way down, and we're going to widen out the stereo separation. And you don't need to memorize all this. Add a little pre-delay, and then cut out the lows. So again, this, like I said, this is a whole science to this. I'm going to turn up the mod, which means it pitch wobbles the reverb. So anyway, on this track is a dedicated reverb, nothing else, just reverb. So what I can do is listen to the sounds in the song, like the melody. And I forgot to drag over our loop. So we definitely need the loop to play. It's a missing key here. I forgot we changed the key. So this is going to be interesting. Because what I would have to do is reconsolidate this and pitch this up. So let's leave that out. Never mind. Okay, but anyway, anything that I want to hear with like a reverb tail, I'm going to send it, it's called, to the reverb. I'm trying to think what I could do. Like this sound right here. I want that to go to the reverb. So what I would do is I click on that specific sound, and you see these little up arrows here. These are our send amounts. So I'm going to send a duplicate of this sound over to this track, this channel. Okay, so it's going to send a duplicate. So now I have an original, unaffected percussion sound, and then I have a fully affected reverb, and I'm blending those two together. So you can control that with this little knob down at the bottom. So it's sending a complete dry signal out to the master, and it's sending another duplicate of itself over to this thing called a reverb. So it's dry, affected, and you're blending those two together. So I'm not adding reverb directly on the sound. And this is just going to add a little dimension to your sound. Let's do the same thing with the our melody. Let's left click, send that there. Let me move these patterns up here. Now again, I'm trying to use as much stock stuff as possible. So a lot of this isn't going to sound the greatest of greatest, but it all starts with the sound selection. You know, what are the samples? What are the drum sounds you use from the beginning? And it wasn't the greatest 808 to begin with. So I just keep that in mind as to when we get to the mixing stage. Let me duplicate this over so we have a little bit more to listen to. We have 1, 2, yeah. Okay, so now I'm sending stuff to that reverb. I'm going to exaggerate it so you can hear what I'm doing. Okay, but we don't want that much reverb, so that's when you left click, and you left click to change that amount. Okay, so now I'm just adding a touch of reverb to each individual sound. That's called sending sound somewhere. Okay, so I'm sending a duplicate of that sound somewhere to be affected by something. So that's a send, okay? Let's go back to this 808. I do want it to feel distorted, but I don't want to directly add distortion on the 808. So let's create another track here, a mixer channel called 808 Distortion. And it's the same concept. We're going to send a duplicate of the 808 over to this track. And let's find the 808. Here's the 808. We're just left clicking on the 808. Now go over here to where it says 808 dis, and then left click it to send an amount there. Now I'm going to send 100% there because I wanted to hear the entire signal. So on this specific track, let's turn the fader down first so we don't get too loud. And let's add only distortion plugins at 100% level. Or 100% mix level. So let's turn the Fruity Fast Distort on 100% mix. I liked it on B mode. So now I'm blending regular 808, and I cloned it, made another 808, and it's distorted 808. So I'm combining distorted 808 and regular 808, and it gives you a different sound. And you can keep the integrity of your original 808 without destroying it. So now we have the distortion without taking away from the low end rumble of the original 808. So you can do really cool stuff to the duplicate. You can really kind of overly process the sound. So let's open up something called Fruity Stereo Enhancer. And let's use the phase offset to create like a left-right thing. And the only thing about this one is it can kind of feel pan to one side. You just got to be careful with this effect. We could do that without affecting the original 808, and I could just turn this fader down to pull in the effect more or less. Okay, so now we're starting to add up. This is why mixing is important. Okay, it kind of changes the feeling of the entire track. So mixing is almost like another form of production. It's a whole separate thing unto itself. So that's that. I'm trying to think what else we can do in mixing. So now let's actually mix this. And if I think of anything, now a couple things you need to know. Like, let's say you like these effects on this channel. You can right click, go to File, Save Mixer Track State As. You left click it and you drag it to another channel, and it duplicates whatever you had on that to the other channel. That's really important for like your vocal records and stuff. So let's right click, hit E to reset, hit enter, and that will reset everything back to normal. Okay, so I'm gonna mix this as per usual. So the first thing I'm gonna do is group all the drums. Let's just find all the drum sounds. Now here's a little shortcut. I like to visually see stuff in the same area. So let me make sure all this stuff is drum. So it's kick, snare, hi-hat, blip, long kick, 808. I think basically all this stuff is the drums, right? Yeah, part 5 is, what is the EDM part? Oh, that's the loop, okay. And then, yeah, so all this right here to the left is drums. So what you do is you hit control, you left click, and you can drag. Now let's say yours weren't lined up like that. You would hit control shift and you would highlight individual tracks that you want, and then you right click this time. So before we were sending a duplicate of something, now we're directly routing something somewhere. So in this case, we're going to right click where it says drums, that up arrow, and route to this track only. So now all these tracks are now only going to this drum track. So this is a group track of drums. And now I can affect all my drums all at once. Now, the only thing is it gets rid of your reverb send. So you have to go back to the original sound and just left click on the up arrow for the reverb to restore your amounts that you had. That's more advanced. If you're a beginner, you don't need to know what I just meant. So I'm just turning the reverb on the sounds that I had. Now, before I work on the drum bus, this is called a bus or group. I'm going to work on the individual sound. So right here, I want to add a Fruity Soft Clipper to the kick, and I'm going to turn the threshold all the way up. Now, the problem is I want my kick to hit harder. So I'm going to add a parametric EQ2, and I'm going to use the left side here. This is a gain knob. A lot of people don't even realize this exists, but it's a gain knob. I'm just going to turn up the gain of the kick so it hits harder. And again, based on the sound design, it's going to sound like whatever, but then pull your fader down. That's how you get that crunchy kick. Let me solo this again. Okay, so you just push it until you get the right texture you want, the right impact. Let me change up my kick pattern because it's not matching the 808. So let me figure out why it's not matching here. There we go, now it's matching. Also, another way to turn up gain is just to go to your channel rack and turn it up there. Or another form of gain is going to your pre-computed effects and turning up the boost knob. So there's a gazillion ways to turn up the gain of your kick. But let's just do the boost knob. There we go. Now at the end, I changed up the 808, so I need it to match the kick. This is production talk. You don't need to know what I'm even saying here. Okay, so I'll show you how to get everything Now, again, we're trying to show you everything all at once. I'm trying to show you more FL than mixing and production techniques and all this. But one thing is this, it's called leveling. So get in the habit of turning stuff down in FL as opposed to up. So we're gonna highlight all these drums, just hit Control left click and just turn all these down. Sounds counterintuitive to turn stuff down, but you get a lot more feeling when you turn stuff down. Let's distort this 808 a little bit more. Oh, you know what happened? I routed the 808 back to the drums. That's what happened. So I need to send the 808 back to the 808 bus. I'm just gonna route it so that we hear the distortion again. Turn that off by accident. Now, when you distort things, sometimes it can make your 808 sound out of key. So it sounds a little detuned. So I'm just gonna pitch it up a little bit. See, notice that all the drums combined are still loud. So everything's kind of quiet individually, but when you add it together, it's pretty loud. So we're hitting at what, -5, which is still pretty loud. We need to turn the stuff down. I feel like it could be stored a little bit differently. Let me try different. Never mind, I'm not gonna obsess because I could literally obsess about the 808 right now. We're using stock plugins. Woosah. Okay. So you're like, wow, it's quiet. Yeah. So when you're mixing, you usually mix at lower levels. A lot of people, they crank all their sounds up and it makes their mix sound worse. Let's send the melody to the reverb. Wait, that's the wrong track. I don't think we're using 3x OSC, so we can get rid of this track. Not using that one. Okay, so I'm trying to think. I feel like the mixer is more complicated, and I feel okay. So the faders you learned about, these are called pan pots. You can pan things left or right. So I can pan the melody like to the left or to the right using this little knob right here. So you could do cool things like create automation clips to where that goes left and right over time. You could do something like that. There's a button called reverse polarity. That's more so for like bass stuff, like the kick. I'm going to turn it up so we can hear it. But if your kick is clashing with the 808 for whatever reason, you could try reversing what's called the polarity. And that just flips the phase of the kick. You don't need to know what that means. The left and right swap, I rarely use that. It just turns your left ear into your right ear and vice versa. Then you have down here, it's called stereo separation. So this requires a stereo sound. And I think our melody, I think it's mono. But what you could do is pull it wider or make it more narrow. Now I think that's already, I think it's this mono sound. Trying to think of a way to explain this. Let's send it to the reverb. Now I'm exaggerating the reverb so we can hear this. So the reverb is stereo, but we can use this knob to make it more narrow or more mono by pulling that to the right. So see how I got like more tightened to the center? Whereas if I pulled it more stereo, it's widening it out. Okay, so that's what that knob does. That's why I said it's important to turn this little thing on, this little blue button that says View Extra Volume Stereo Properties, because that's the button that you get, which is pretty important. And then these buttons down here, we'll get into record in a second. Okay, so first let me just edit the drum track. We're gonna run our drums through a Fruity Soft Clipper. Where's it at, Fruity Soft Clipper? So the kick already has a Fruity Soft Clipper on it. But if you have other things like a snare that's hitting pretty hard, you can send it through that to get it a little more energy. So let's turn up our snap sound. Let's just turn down the distortion a little bit on the 808. Balance it a little bit better. So now I'm just turning up the important stuff. You can pan out the percussion. I'm just panning percussion. You don't always have to pan percussion, but it opens up some room sometimes in the middle. So I'm just showing you stuff. Where's our snap? Let's turn this up. Okay, so I mean, there's really not a lot I do outside of that. Mixing is really just what plugins you add and in what order and how do you affect those plugins. That's really the art of the mixer, is these slots, these different slots. Trying to think of something else that's important to show you. Let's say you run out of slots. That's why you would send that duplicate or direct it to like right here, this track, we right clicked and sent it over to the drum track by routing to that track directly. That opens up more slots of effects for you. So if you wanted to add like 10 more plugins, you could do it that way. So you have the plugins on this channel and then you have the plugins on this channel affecting the sound. So what I can do is like stuff like EQ the drums as a whole. Not that I would ever use this. I'm just showing you little stuff you could do. Maybe knock it down at 20 hertz. Boost it up at 70-ish. And in the top left, it reads different values for you. Boost up somewhere like 5K. So I'm just adding more enhancements to the drums. Now it did get louder, so you can pull down what's called the gain knob to gain match. You don't need to know what all this means. I'm just showing you little stuff. Okay, what else? I feel like the mixer is more complicated than that, but I guess without plugins, it's not that complicated. Yeah, it's really the mixer. Now, over here is more of like, why this is separate from this is only for the video's sake. It's usually not separated, and I don't usually separate it. But if you wanted to do something like that, you could right click and dock to the right or the left. And what it does is it creates a separate little thing with this little divider, and it moves that track over to the right. So basically I can, if it doesn't matter what track I'm on, my mic always stays right there. So that's a quick way to do that. Now let's record an idea to this. So the last piece really in the mixer is recording. Oh, I forgot we did a key change. So that might be, let me record a melody only to the beginning half. So this does not come with FL. It's called Auto Tune. This does not come with FL Studio. I want to be clear. They have something called Pitcher, but it's not the same. Okay, so I just want to make it very clear. The Pitcher is not the same as Auto Tune, and Auto Tune does not come with FL. So let's figure out what key that sample is in. I think it says E flat minor. So in this case, we're going to trust that the sample maker has the right key. So E flat minor would be D sharp, which is what we wrote the thing in. So E flat is D sharp, and then minor, and then I'm a low male. Let's turn the retune speed all the way up. And now you have my Travis Scott voice on. Okay, so that's only this section is E flat minor. The other section's not. So let's just record something. So the question is, how do you record? One, you need to select an input. How does my voice sound through Auto-Tune? Let's turn that off. You need to select an input. So up here, you see it says this little black bar. You click here, and before you click there, actually, you need to go to Options, Audio Settings, and you need to go to Device and choose from your audio interface. If you're on a PC, you would select ASIO, and you would select your audio interface. If you don't know what an audio interface is, you got to do your homework. That's too much to explain right now. Now, when you're recording, I like to have mine at 128 to about 136 samples, and that's because when you're recording, you want it to be very fast and not slow. All right, so let's hit X, and now that I have all that set up, you go right here and you select your microphone. So mine's on line 1. You don't need to know what all that means. It's the first input on my interface. Yours is going to be wherever you plugged in your stuff. Okay, so it's going to be different for everybody, but you're going to select the mono where it says mono right here. It's not a stereo. You're going to select mono and then pick from your microphone source inputs. So that's how you get your microphone into FL. Can you chill? Maybe I gotta put you on timeout. So now what we're going to do is turn on auto tune or whatever effect you want, and then hit pre. This is important that you hit pre. All right, because when actually you don't always have to do this, but what pre means, if you switch this from pre and post, it means that I can record through auto tune, but it doesn't commit to the sound. So just in case I pick the wrong key and I have to go change it, then it won't affect the final recording. If you have this on post mode, it will record through all those plugins and it commits to whatever you recorded, and that's it. You can't change it. But if you have it on pre, you can always go back and change it. So question is, how do you set up a microphone? It sounds interesting though. So first thing, add autotune. Then again, you send a duplicate of that sound. So click on your microphone channel and send a duplicate by left clicking onto something like a reverb. So now I'm hearing not only myself through autotune, but through reverb as well. And that's going to help an artist be a little bit more creative. So now you can just kind of say whatever. Let me give myself a little bit more room to be creative. Now I'm not recording in my other studio, so I'm going to give it like a half-baked concept, but I just want to show you what it's like to record, because recording is a little bit different and it's a little bit more tedious too. So what I would recommend when you're recording is going back to your playlist, right click, go to track mode, go to audio track, and then find your microphone name on the list here. So mine is track. What track is my mic on? I have no idea. Mine is track 122. Okay, so mine's on 122. You see how it says insert 122? We're gonna go back to an empty track. All right, what's wrong with you kids? You're getting banned. Bye-bye. Right click where it says track 19. Go to track mode, then go to audio track and go to 122, which is my microphone. Okay, it's really important that you understand that. And that's because when you're recording, it will usually pick whatever, it just picks a random place and puts the audio there. But now that we told it exactly where to record to, it will only record to that specific track. And that's something that is unique to FL Studio as opposed to other DAWs. So let's click here at the bottom where this little circle is. It says ARM disk for recording. Now you have to be on that track. Again, FL is a little bit different than other DAWs, so it's still trying to figure out its recording process. So you have to be on this track, hit stop twice, hit record, audio into playlist as an audio clip. And now I'm recording my voice, and it will show up on that track that we chose.
Diamond, VV, OTV, shining, VV, OTV.
So I just said random stuff. Now again, we're in a different key at that point because it goes up 3 semitones. But then what you do is go to song mode. I'm going to turn auto tune off for a second. Now the problem is, don't make me turn the chat on slow mode, because I will if you're going to be a D about it. Go to song mode and let's turn the reverb off. My voice for a second. Yeah, I don't like recording in Edison for a lot of reasons. Anyway, now the thing is, if I listen back, if I go to the channel rack, okay, or if I click in the top left, go to channel settings, it routes it automatically back to wherever I recorded. Now the problem with this is, I don't know why FL does this, but the issue with this is if I go to record again, it's going to record the same thing into itself. All right, I'm putting slow mode on because you guys just want to be that guy today. So I got to put slow mode on. Hold up. We got jealous people sending bots our way. That is so lame because it ruins it for everybody else. Hold up. Stream settings. Hold on, y'all. Gotta put the, where's it at? Slow mode. Added delay. No, not added delay. We're gonna figure this out. Hold on, y'all. Unfortunately, we gotta put slow mode on. Forget where they put it. Hold on. See what happens when you try to help people? People try to ruin it for everybody else. Okay. Where is it at? Slow mode. Where's slow mode, bruh? We're gonna figure out slow mode. Give me a second. I'm not gonna put my energy into this person. Gotta figure out where slow mode is. Live chat, here it is. Slow mode. Fortunately, we gotta put it on slow mode so that spam is just not gonna happen. All right, so forgive me, chat. Try to save your good comments. Excuse me. All right, so when I record again audio into playlist as an audio clip, it's gonna record that same thing, my voice, and it will show up on that track that we chose. See how I'm not saying anything, but it's recording? Check. Okay. So here's the mistake a lot of people make. They'll record themselves by accident without even knowing. So that's something you got to be really careful about. I'm in Philadelphia area, not Philly itself, but the area of Philadelphia. And so if I just listen to this new audio clip, my voice, and it will show up on that track that we chose. See how I'm not saying anything, but it's recording? Check. And I recorded over myself. So you got to be really careful when you're going to record. You can accidentally do that. Because by default, for whatever reason, I don't know who programmed it this way, but it sends it back to the track that you recorded on. So anyway, if you go to the top left of that track, you just want to right click and hit reset or hit Control L so it goes to a different track. And that's really important because you can accidentally record over yourself and just ruin your good takes. So just keep that in mind. Now, I also remember I set it to pre. So on pre, what it does is it takes off the effects. So notice when you heard that, you didn't hear auto tune. So what you're going to have to do is copy your effects from your recording chain over to that track. So you right click, go to file, save mixer track state as, and you drag it over to 23. So now it has the same effects as the way you recorded it. So now you're going to hear the auto tune. So that's the difference between pre and post. You have to reapply those effects back to the sound in order to hear it. So that's how that works. Now notice when I right clicked and went to track mode, and then I put it on audio track and all that, it only stuck to just that track when it's recording. If you don't put that on, FL could record the track 16. It could record the track 1. It like finds random spots to put the audio, and it's very disorganized. And what it also does is it groups audio up underneath it. So when you keep recording, it just groups your recordings all under one track. So that's that. I don't want to dig too deep into recording because that's a different thing, but that's how you record in FL Studio. What's last? So the browser. So the browser, let me show you how to import drum kits into your browser. What you want to do is go to options, go to file settings, and then what you do is here under browse extra search folders, you click on the little folder icon, and then you find your sounds. So mine are on my external hard drive. I just go to sounds. Let me pick the better view. I go to sounds. I go to my friend sounds. And then this whole folder is full of drum kits. So I would just hit open in this case. And what it does is by default, it just takes the name of the folder and it shows up over in the browser. But let's say you wanted to name it something else. You just double click where it says browser name. And I'll say test 321. Okay. And now hit enter. And now what it does is it creates a folder in your browser called test 321. So if you have a weird name folder like March 2020 on your hard drive, but you want to name it like decap drums or something like that, then you can rename it under browser name. So now if I go back to the browser icon again, one of the 5 icons here, click browser. If you have open folders, now FL20 updated it to where you don't have a bunch of open folders. Notice how if I open MG's folder and open decap's folder, it closes the other folder. Before it used to open up both folders, so it used to get really disorganized really quickly. But what you can do, if you ever get lost, hit collapse structure, this little up arrow, and that will reset your view. Okay, and then what you want to do whenever you import drum kits into your browser, hit reread structure, and then you'll see your name of your folder right here. So the test 321 shows up right here, and then you can left click that to open those sounds up. So that's how you add drum kits to your browser and rename it how you like it. And then you could double click and delete stuff that you don't want. The browser, what else is cool about the browser? I guess I thought the browser would have more stuff. So sometimes, let's say you right click and you record, let's say I record automation, and then I'm listening to my beat and I move the metronome. Okay, and then I'm like, oh, okay, and I hit stop, and I didn't realize I moved the metronome. And I'm like, what happened? How did my beat go from 140 to 149? And I hit spacebar and it keeps going back to 140. So a really important thing in the browser to understand is how to reset automation. So if you go to the browser, go to current project, go to patterns, go to initialized controls. And here's where you can completely get rid of things that are screwed up. So right here, I'm controlling the tempo. So the tempo's screwed up. I'm just going to right click and delete that event. And also you go to your channel rack and you look for any automation clips. So you can click here, go to automation and look for anything that says tempo, which I don't see anything that says tempo. So in that case, now it won't do that thing. It won't screw up at that point. Actually, it just screwed up again. Let's figure out. Oh, you know what? I didn't realize why it would happen. So not only do you have to do the initialize controls, you also have to tell it to start at that point. So let's right click where it says 140 and initialize song with this position. Hey, why is this? Oh, okay, that's why. Okay, never mind. I realized what it just did. It recorded my automation into a pattern. Okay, so that's what just happened. That's what was throwing me off. So right click, go to browser, go to current projects, the patterns, initialize controls. Let's delete forever because we don't want anything manipulating the tempo. Now on pattern 7, what it was doing was recording the tempo information. Now this is where it gets a little convoluted because there's no way to view that event. You have to do it in a really weird way, which is go here. And I believe if you go to edit pattern, there's something called edit events. And I'm trying to figure out where the screen would be. I think it's under right click, edit events. Okay, here it is. So this is like worst case scenario. If you screwed something up, you would have to edit the event. Let's just hit Control A, Control X, get rid of that. So that's going to get rid of that little weird shape that it had on pattern 7. Let's go back to 140. It should stay at 140. Okay, so I recorded a different type of animation. I mean, of automation. Okay, but usually speaking, when you use what's called an automation clip, like if I right click and create an automation clip for the tempo and I change the tempo like this, and then let's say I move it around, something like that, and I delete the tempo, but it's still doing that like pitch bend stuff, then you would go to current project, patterns, initialize controls, and delete the automation and delete the tempo controls that way, and also delete the automation clip. So I showed you 4 ways to do if you ever run into that problem. It's one of those 4 ways. What else about the browser? I guess if you want to quick find stuff, quick search stuff, I meant, you can search like a big folder of sounds. So let's say you remember something's called like something clap, or like you're looking for a symbol. You could right click, go to smart find in this folder and type in symbol. And then you'll find symbols. Now on a Mac there, you can't do the function, but on PC you hit F2 and F3 to cycle up and down. Now on Mac you can't use F2 and F3. At least I haven't figured it out. So you have to go to the top left and find next. Again, on Mac there's no F3, so I don't know what that would be the equivalent. Maybe function 3. Let's see if this works. Function 3. No, see, that doesn't even do the same thing. So they have to, I don't know what F3 the equivalent on Mac would be. But anyway, you would just click this little top left thing, go to find next. And then it just finds anything with that name in it. So the name symbol is what I was searching for. So it goes through all your packs and looks for anything with the name symbol. Now it has to have it in the name, not just, now one day they're gonna have a tag system in the metadata, but until that day. So that's how you find certain samples that you're like, I forget what it's called, but it's a djembe or like a marimba. Like I know what it's called, I just forget what pack it's in. You could just search real quick by right clicking, smart find in this folder. I'm trying to think what else about the browser. You You can load project files from here. You can load, you could just like, these are project files. I could just left click these, drag them up to the top left, and it will load that up. You can open up MIDI from here. You can load up audio from here. I think the only audio style stuff it doesn't take is like M4A. So you're gonna have to convert stuff either to FLAC or to WAV or to MP3 in order to use the audio. Because I know if you record on certain things like the iPhone, I think it puts it in M4A format. It might not be so easy. It might not be so easy to drag that audio straight into FL without a converter program. What else is in here? That's pretty much it. I don't use all this extra stuff in the browser. Is there a way to quickly maneuver the pattern selection? The pattern selection while wondering, what? Is there a way to quickly maneuver the pattern selection? As far as you can right click here, select the patterns if that's what you mean. Or you can change, let's say you have 2 different melodies or something like this. Pattern 2, you can click up top here, go to select source pattern, change that out to a different pattern. I don't know if that's what you're referring to. That's the quickest way I like to do it. There's another way where you can pull up the entire screen. I don't even remember how to do it. But there's like a pattern selector somewhere. It's not, I think it's right here. No, that's not it. But that's the way I do it. I'm not sure if that answers your question. So let me mix this and then we'll wrap this up. Because I mean, we went over everything really. So let me just mix this as if I were making a track. Okay, so one thing is these samples are all different tracks. So let's add these to a sample group. Sample bus. Some people call it a bus, just like kids get on a bus, multiple kids. So that's how I remember bus. You can hit Alt left. This is what I meant to show you earlier. Alt left and Alt right will move that mixer channel around, so you can move it closer to the sample so they don't get lost. So I can hit Control, left click, and highlight all those. And I forgot what that last one. I think that's a percussion. And then right click and route to this track only. And so what it does now is all the samples are going to show up on the sample bus. So now I can add the effects to that specific thing without having to do it for each thing. Okay, so let's load up a delay. So now I'm just gonna quickly add some effects. Now we didn't like pick the greatest sounds in the world. The next live is gonna be probably tomorrow, hopefully, because I got to get off of here and hop into another talk that I promised to be on. So I have to end this stream, unfortunately, but so now let's mix this. Now I also forgot that the kick in the beginning is at a different level than the kick at the end. So again, this mix is very rough draft, just keep that in mind. It's because we have 2 different, let me just mix the ending because this is the real part. Now, here's a little secret tip. If you load up Patcher, Patcher actually has plugins inside Patcher. So if you have it on, it'll mute the sound because there's nothing going on. You have to go to presets, you right click this, and then you can select different plugins. So they have different things like distortion plugins, one knob stuff basically. So I'm looking for a saturator plugin. Now these are all name weird stuff. So you just have to go through, figure out what means what. 3 exciter, it was probably Check. Hold on. Check. Goodness. Sometimes my audio, it's the audio buffer length stuff. Anyway, I think this is an exciter. Let's turn this on. It sounds like it's exciting the low end. Very subtle, but so again, this is not how I mix. I mean, there's a lot to do in mixing, but it all starts with the sound source. So I'm just quickly doing this just to show you a couple things you could do, but don't take this as like a step-by-step process, okay? Because it all starts with the proper sound selection, which we didn't do. There's no sounds in FL Studio stock that give you the modern trap sound. You gotta be careful with these plugins because it's creating like a boxy sound, and that's just the plugin itself. That's why I said this is not my chain at all for this type of stuff. I'm just showing you little things. my voice. And let me just show you what I would use. I'm not going to use all these plugins because it makes it sound worse. I don't want to give you a bad. Let me just use what I would actually use just to show you, because it's taking more mental brain power to figure out how to work around it. Check. So in Isotope, there's a master assistant. I'm going to do that just to save time. I don't actually use that a lot, but this is just for the video's sake. Okay, that was me hitting a key by accident. So I suggest you turn down your headphones right now. It's about to be a little bit louder than usual. So what it did was get all the leveling right. All right, so here I would just add an imager. Pulling it. All right, so now the track list open. So Ozone is not included with FL Studio. That's an outside plugin suite, but I would recommend it. It just has the plugins you need for mixing. All right, so that's it for today, the FL Studio Masterclass. I got to hop on to another call, which is on Clubhouse, one of the panelist rooms. So I got to be a panelist. And you're going to have access to this video for 24 hours. Maybe I'll do 48 hours to be fair. I'm just debating between 24 and 48. So we didn't make the greatest of greatest beats, but hopefully you understand how to navigate through FL Studio. Again, I would not recommend using stock sounds. They just very hard to make them sound good, in my opinion, for trap and hip hop. So that's all I wanted to show you. And I think we went over everything about everything. So now if you want to learn more, you can like more about music production, and you want to learn the craft of music production and how to make beats like the top artist, go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. Let me actually add the link now because I will forget. So let's do it live. What happened to my live? Are we live? Hold on. I hope we're live. I hope I didn't do that all in vain. Connection. Are we live? Somebody let me know we're live so I know that I'm not tripping. Is that a different chat? Maybe it's a different stream. Hold on. It says we're live. What is going on? Screen's weird. Okay, so I'm going to add the premium here just so people know. So again, if you want to learn more, go to www.busyworksbeats.com/premium. Click here for over 26 music production courses, because that's what you get access to, a bunch of stuff. So go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. If you're really trying to learn how to make beats, we have a whole suite of courses from music theory to mixing to sound design to how to make the beat, how to arrange the beat, songwriting stuff in there. It's basically university level training for making beats at busyworksbeats.com/premium. All right, so that is it. And I got to hop off because I got to be on another call on Clubhouse. So shout out to everybody in here. Smash the like button on your way out, please, so we can help more people around the world. I'm trying to help 1 million served soon on YouTube. And that's all I have to say. So yeah, we'll do like a Q&A maybe tomorrow because I don't want to mess the video up for everybody else. So peace out, guys. Thank you.